Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. We are here, the culture war. We're going to be discussing Trump versus DeSantis 2024. There have been a lot of polls coming out showing Vivek Ramaswamy has been jumping into second place. It's back and forth. Ron DeSantis has a pack behind him. He has lots of funds, but there's talk about donors maybe not sticking with him so much, but we'll see. So today, we're going to be having a discussion with Laura Loomer, Bill Mitchell, and Kyle Becker over their views of Trump versus DeSantis. And we have Laura Loomer hanging out right now, and I believe we have Bill and Kyle are coming in. Bill Mitchell.
Hey.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
This will be, you can sit right here.
Right here, okay.
Kyle, welcome back.
Hey, thank you, Tim.
Yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
the
And then you can just sit here over at the ammo box. And we'll do a quick round of intros, and then we'll start discussing 2024 politics.
Good to see you. Shake your hand. Reach across.
We can wave.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. I brought you guys gifts.
Oh, thank you.
You look like you'd be a large, right? Large.
Yeah.
Brought you your very own Donald Trump did nothing wrong shirt.
All right. I'll take
There you go.
it.
And
I'll
I know
take
that you are.
Well, I will
you
take
are
the shirt.
such a Trump
I
fan,
disagree.
so-
I disagree with the premise of
I
the
had
shirt.
to bring
but
you one, so
I disagree with the premise of the shirt, but I can always use the shirt for something.
I know you think I'm awful, so don't say I never did anything nice for
Okay,
you.
thank you.
There
To
go.
you. You almost said to you.
For you.
Actually, you want to tell me what you were going to
Yeah. There's, yeah.
Here you go.
Thank you.
We'll do quick intros, but actually, is anyone...
Just be 2 seconds. How would that?
Yeah, we can post it out. We're going live.
Sure.
So if you go down this hall,
Let's see.
you'll see it on the right, or just ask somebody. It's on the right side in that hallway. But we'll do intros to start anyway.
Yeah,
so I don't
we'll
know, Laura.
retweet it now that we're going live.
Well, we're live, so
Yeah, well, now that we are live, so tell everybody.
whoever finishes texting first, if you guys want to, take it away.
Well, okay, just tweeted that out. So, thanks so much for having me and inviting me to your studio. My name is Laura Loomer, and of course, we've known each other for several years. But I'm an investigative journalist. I'm an activist, and a lot of people know me because, well, for several years, I was the most banned woman in the world, the most censored, one of the first people in this country, along with Alex Jones and others, to be completely deplatformed. Pretty much everywhere, right? I only recently just got my Twitter account back in December, but I'm still banned everywhere else, right?
You were debanked too, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So I got debanked, and then, as you reported, you were one of the only people to really report on my congressional campaign and the censorship. Made history because I ran for Congress in 2020 and 2022 in Florida as an America First Republican, and during both election seasons, I was the first and only deplatformed, like completely deplatformed candidate in United States history. And the big tech social media companies actually created policies specifically targeting me and my campaign. So they had said originally at Twitter, they're going to allow every single candidate for Congress or governor to have an account. And I was the only one. They said, except Laura Loomer. Cassandra Fairbanks actually contacted the Twitter spokesperson and said, so are you going to reinstate Laura Loomer? And they said, everyone but Laura Loomer. And then, of course, everyone knows I won my primary in Florida in President Trump's home district in Palm Beach. That was District 21 at the time. And it's an honor because President Trump voted for me in the primary and the general. And even as the declared Republican candidate on the ballot for the general election in 2020, they still wouldn't allow me to have any social media. So, and then of course I ran again in 2022, and well, it's hard to get elected to office when you're completely silenced and we live in a digital public square. And now, of course, I'm doing everything that I can to help President Trump, the greatest president we've ever had in this country, get elected.
Right on. Kyle?
So, name's Kyle Becker. I'm CEO of Becker News. I'll be doing a Relentless podcast later on this month. I'll be launching that with a producer down in Texas. Yeah, and so I'm excited to be here. I was recently a DeSantis supporter. I think a lot of people recognize that, but I feel like I've always been very fair to Donald Trump. I believe that he has a lot of great qualities, and he had an excellent presidency. I think for the most part, in terms of my personal political preferences. So I look forward to being a part of this debate because I think I have very good advocates here whose arguments I respect and their passion. I appreciate. So. I appreciate the invite here. So
For sure.
Look forward to this.
And Bill, who are you?
Hi, yes, I'm Bill Mitchell, and I'm the host of Your Voice America. I've been around for a while. I was very involved in the Trump
You want to
2016.
slide this way just a little bit? Yeah, sorry.
Is that a little better?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And then just grab that mic. Sorry about that.
I was very involved in the Trump 20. Where's camera am I going? This one?
Yeah.
Okay. I was very involved in the Trump 2016 campaign. MIT ranked me as the 26th most influential person, and that because of the Twitter feed. And on election night, my Twitter feed did about 90 million hits. And so my original choice was Trump with DeSantis as a VP, but Trump wasn't feeling that. And so I decided to shift over to DeSantis. So now I'm a big DeSantis advocate. And I understand that a lot of folks on the Trump side see me as Benedict Arnold now because I was such a huge Trump guy. And now I'm a big DeSantis person. But, I'm here to have just a debate of the ideas and to strategize because, at the end of the day, we need to win this thing.
Right on.
It's not that Trump wasn't feeling it. It's unconstitutional, right? So you do know that you can't have a presidential candidate and a vice presidential candidate from the same state on the same ballot. So a lot of people push this idea that, oh, wow, it's going to be a Trump DeSantis ticket, and DeSantis is going to be the VP. But people don't seem to understand that, you can't have a presidential candidate and a vice presidential ticket from the same state. And now that we know that President Trump changed his residency from New York to Florida, he's a Floridian. And there are currently 3 Floridians running for president in the state of Florida, right? You have President Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami.
So that's just a quick clarification. Article 2 of the Constitution states the electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for 2 persons of whom one at least shall not be an inhabitant of the same state with themselves. I heard a lot about this. I didn't know if that was true or not.
It is true. Yeah. And Roger Stone, of course, who's, a really great friend of mine and also President Trump's, longest friend and former advisor, or current advisor, I believe as well. He has written extensively about this. And so, it's important for people to understand this because there was really this demonization of President Trump, right? Something like, oh, well, he just doesn't want to have DeSantis as a VP because, it would show him up and it's all about President Trump's ego when really it's actually in our Constitution. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, well, there's no constitutional rule against 2 people being from the same state, although there may be a situation where you have a problem with the electors. However, people forget that George Bush and Cheney were both from Texas. And Cheney went ahead and changed his residency to Wyoming so they could run together. So Trump could have gone to New York. He could have gone to Las Vegas as far as residency, and they could have run together. So it's not a impossible leap.
Why would President Trump want to go to a hostile blue state where you have district attorneys and prosecutors trying to come after him? I'm just correcting the record because you said that it was because of President Trump, right? And we want to be factual here.
Well, as a matter of fact, we're talking about a subjective issue here, and factually, he could have gone there. He decided not to, and my belief is that Trump does not want to share the stage with another alpha male. And let me explain.
But Ron DeSantis is the one that's on the record actually saying that he's not really a number 2 kind of guy. He said, "Oh, I'm more of an executive guy." You could look it up. Direct quote.
Let me explain to you.
So it's Ron DeSantis, not Trump.
Let me explain to you why. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Let me explain to you why I wanted this relationship. Because Trump is more of a CEO type. I was a headhunter for many years. So Trump is more of a CEO type personality. He's more the guy that stands there as a showman, is the front man, is the guy that stands on the hill, says, points that away. Okay. DeSantis is more like we have in corporate world of a president who runs the day-to-day operations. And my goal was to have Trump as the front man, give him another bite at the apple because I felt like he was ripped off in 2020. And then have DeSantis running the operations behind the scenes because DeSantis is a extremely brilliant, Harvard-educated legislator. Okay, he understands legislation to the granular level. Trump is famous for not wanting to read, not wanting to dive into documents, wanting bullet points on things. So I don't think that Trump was very good at running the day-to-day operations of the White House. That's where he failed. So I like the idea of that 1-2 punch coming together, and then DeSantis could work for Trump for 4 years as an apprenticeship and then take over for 8 years.
If Ron DeSantis is such a scholar, though, right? You're saying that, he's so Ivy League and he's such an expert on the Constitution. Why does so much of the legislation that he has signed into law get struck down on grounds that it's unconstitutional? You would think that a guy that claims that he's such a hotshot Harvard-trained lawyer, right, and a Yale athlete would be
Like
able
what
to
you
pass
said
bills
so
that are
much.
constitutional.
You obviously have several things in mind. Like, give me an example.
Well, the big tech social media bill, right? So Ron DeSantis loves talking about how, oh, it's the free state of Florida and we have free and fair elections in the free state of Florida and we don't have censorship. And he famously went on Tucker Carlson's show and said that he had made it illegal in the state of Florida for candidates running for office to be banned on social media, and said that if candidates were banned and deplatformed, that they were going to, the state of Florida was going to institute fines against the big tech companies. Well, I would know, given the fact that I was the only candidate in the state of Florida that was completely deplatformed. But I guess, because I'm pro-Trump and, we know that Ron DeSantis has been planning his presidential campaign for the last 2.5 years in the state of Florida, he had no intention of actually implementing this. And then, of course, a judge found that because they made the bill revolve around Section 230, which if he really is such a constitutional genius, as you're saying, he should know that the states don't have the authority to modify Section 230 because that's a federal law, right? It's a federal issue. So I just think that's important because, there's really just been this facade that's been created for Ron DeSantis. I would say that he's really a Manchurian candidate. The media and the GOP establishment has been grooming him. Okay, Fox News, Rupert Murdoch.
Like Karen DiGiorno, your Bush campaign manager?
I want to go back because I think there was something important that you brought up. You were saying you wanted it to be Trump, DeSantis.
That's what I wanted originally.
And I agree.
Yeah. I thought that would have checked all the boxes.
And for the same reasons that Trump is the guy. He's the chief, but he needs a right-hand man who's going to execute properly. However, it sounds like Ron DeSantis is the one at fault for that not happening. He's the one who said, I'm not a number two kind of guy. I'm going to run for president.
He said, I'm not a number two kind of guy long after Trump had rejected him, was calling him meatball and DeSanctimonious and all these other sophomore.
That's because he was running for president.
But he said this after that had taken place. He did not say this.
No, that's dishonest. He's been planning a presidential campaign for the last 2.5 years, okay? It's been widely reported in the state of Florida and really nationally now that Ron DeSantis has been laying the groundwork for a presidential campaign since November of 2020. And, I ran for Congress in Palm Beach County, and a lot of the donors who are on Ron DeSantis's finance committee for his campaign, right? These are people who told me point blank in 2020 and 2021 during private meetings that they had been asked to be on his 2024 presidential finance committee. So this has been in the works for a long time. Obviously, Ron DeSantis knew that, he didn't just wake up in May when he filed and say, I'm going to run for president. Right. He pressured the Florida legislature, okay, in violation of Florida's Resign to Run law and really in violation of just ethical standards, period, to change the Florida Resign to Run law. He hand-appointed the Florida Secretary of State, Cord Bird, in May of 2022. And then he had Cord Bird quietly change the rules in the Florida Political Handbook so that you could transfer funds from a Florida State Political Committee, which is, before this change was made, you couldn't transfer funds, right, from state to federal entities. He had him quietly change the handbook so that he could transfer the money that he raised when he was governor over to the federal Never Back Down super PAC, right? So it just shows he doesn't really have moral character. He's willing to bend the rules.
Wait, a representative of Donald Trump is saying somebody else doesn't have moral character?
You're trying to say that this is about President Trump's ego when, if we're really being honest here, Ron DeSantis had been planning to run for president even, up until the time, like days before the 2020 presidential election, which we all know was stolen.
I could say I have no problem if someone said both of them are lacking in moral character. An argument against Trump and an argument to DeSantis are two separate things. If DeSantis was changing the rules and preparing to run as president for a long time, I mean, that's that argument for, you have to make your argument as to why he should or should not have done that. We can insult Trump, but that doesn't change anything Ron DeSantis did.
Right.
Okay, listen, I have no problem with Ron DeSantis wanting to be president of the United States. Here's the odd problem that I have. And this is what turned the table for me. What made me finally say, okay, I'm done with Trump. And so many people that follow me on Twitter that were former Trump supporters have finally said, I'm done with Trump. When President Trump came out and he said 3 days before DeSantis' election, he started calling him Ron DeSanctimonious. And then he said that Ron DeSantis is a globalist and a rhino, for which there was no evidence whatsoever. This was the lie that
He didn't call him a globalist and a
Listen, I
rhino
let you
before the
talk.
election.
I let you talk.
But
I
he
let
did. But
you
you're
talk.
lying, Bill. You're lying. He
Okay,
called him.
wait a minute.
He
Listen,
called him
I'm not going to sit here and let her talk over me. You're
I'll
not
let
going
you
to talk over
talk,
me.
but we can't allow him to
You're not
lie
gonna
to
talk
millions
over
of
me.
people.
You're not going to talk.
lying.
You're not going to talk over me. Just
respond after he
Okay.
finishes.
Just
But he's
wait and let
lying.
me
I'm
finish
pointing it
talking.
out.
Okay, this is why I don't let you in my spaces on Twitter, because you talk over.
No, you
everybody.
don't let me in your spaces because you know that you'd be loomered and totally destroyed. Like
Okay.
you can't. I'm able to cite these encyclopedia facts that are ingrained in my mind about Florida law, and all you have is, oh, Orange Man bad, Trump is so bad, oh, he's so mean. Like, do you actually have any facts or policy, or do you know about any of the laws that Ron DeSantis changed?
Let me
or are you just a mouthpiece?
Let him finish, and then
She
we'll have
literally
you...
is incapable of controlling
Well,
herself.
No, I
let's-
can
let's-
control
let's-
myself, but you're not
let's-
going to lie about
This
President
is why
Trump. and get away
Marjorie
with it.
Taylor Greene calls you crazy.
Okay,
this is
oh,
why
yeah,
Marjorie
'cause-
Taylor Greene says you should not work for Trump because she considers you crazy. I know it's a hot
And you
button
think
issue
you
for
think
you.
I care about what a congresswoman who cheated on her husband and
There
who
we go.
is basically a mouthpiece for Kevin
Anyway,
McCarthy?
let me
You
make
think
my
I
point.
care about what she
Let me get
thinks?
to my point. I want to make my point, please.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll have him make his point, and then you can respond,
Okay.
Laura.
So Trump said that Ron DeSantis is a rhino. Trump said that Ron DeSantis is a globalist. There is no evidence of that. In Ron DeSantis' time as governor, there's no evidence of anything like that. Now, that's a broad statement that you have to have a real pattern of behavior to prove that. To me, that was it. I was done with Trump. I couldn't do this. All the unforced errors, inviting Kanye, inviting your good friend Nick Fuentes, the white nationalist, to dinner, all the stuff associating with...
It's another lie.
Which
It's another
one?
lie.
Sure.
He said that President Trump invited Nick Fuentes. In reality, the dinner
didn't.
with President Trump. No, what happened is President
Nick Fuentes
Trump.
isn't your good friend?
That's not what I
Do
said.
you disavow? Well, tell me, do you disavow
let me
Nick
explain
Fuentes?
what happened.
I don't-
So
yeah,
there's been
I
a
don't
lot
think
of
that's true.
misinformation about the dinner. So what happened is the dinner was actually supposed to, it took place on November 25th, I believe, okay? It was supposed to happen 2 months prior, but then something happened and they had to reschedule. And so originally it was supposed to be a one-on-one dinner with Ye and President Trump. And then Ye didn't tell President Trump or his staff that he was going to be bringing Nick and another individual with him. And he showed up to Mar-a-Lago. And then, President Trump had said, well, I guess if your friends are here, come in. And nobody knew, nobody had any advance information. His staff didn't know that Ye was going to be bringing other people. But President Trump, because he's a very hospitable person, as I saw firsthand this weekend when he invited me to, spend time with him at Bedminster, he just said, okay, have your friends come sit down with us. And one of the people there was Karen Giorno, who was one of his former state directors in 2016. And for
Big
full
Bushy, by the
disclosure,
way.
she
Huge
had
Bush
been
supporter.
she had been one of my strategists for my campaign, which I have severely grown to regret. We don't work together anymore. We don't talk, and so he had thought, okay, well, just come down, sit and have dinner. And then ultimately, Karen was working with Milo and they leaked the details to the media. And Milo admitted to the press that he did it because he wanted to make Trump's life miserable and to get revenge on him. And one of the reasons why I don't work with Karen anymore, right, is because I'm very pro-Trump and she seems to have all of this animosity towards him for some reason. And I believe that they teamed up to get revenge on Donald Trump. Nick was not invited by President Trump. And so when you say, oh, Trump invited Nick, no, Trump invited Ye, and Ye ended up bringing Nick along because Nick had flown to LA 2 days earlier. So it's important that we get the facts right.
And Trump
because
said he
there's
had
so
no
many
idea who
lies.
Nick Fuentes. How could Trump not know who
He
Nick
said he didn't
Fuentes
know who
was?
he was.
but
He said he doesn't know because there was no advance. There was no
proving-
advanced introduction or preparation.
So you're right now, you're
by
going
his
to go
staff.
on record disavowing Nick Fuentes, who said that he thinks that Hitler is effing cool?
Why do I have to disavow somebody? I'm
Okay,
a
I
free
knew you
speech
wouldn't. I knew
absolutist.
you wouldn't. I knew you
I'm a
wouldn't.
Jewish woman, and I have enough integrity to fight for everybody's free speech rights, even people who make sometimes derogatory comments about Jews and Israel. I'm a free speech absolutist. I'm also very pro-Israel. I'm a self-identified Zionist, and the First Amendment applies to everybody. And we've already had rulings in
You
this
hang
country.
out with this guy. How
We've
about
already
Ali,
had
how about
rulings
Ali
in this- we
Alexander,
already have-
who was on the record?
What does that have
But is-
anything to do
but
with
is this an argument
What
with
does
Trump,
this
or are
have
you guys mad at
anything
each
to
other?
do?
What?
What
Are
does
we
this
gonna
have?
talk about about Trump or
But
DeSantis.
are we going to talk about Trump or DeSantis? Exactly.
I'm going to her credibility.
No,
Okay, but let's
this
go
is what
back to
Bill's
what I
going
was
to do. I just want everybody to know. He's going to attack me because DeSantis doesn't have any policies. He knows that
DeSantis doesn't have any policies.
He doesn't have any policies. He's
Poor
ripped
Kyle.
every.
This is
ripped
about
himself.
DeSantis versus Trump. Let's get back on track here.
Exactly. And
Kyle's
so
getting mad.
I want to talk. I'm here to talk about President Trump and his policies and why he's the better candidate. Okay. If you want to attack me, we can have our own space sometime, but we're not going to waste time so that you can, try to paint
Okay,
me
let's
as
talk
some
about
kind of radical.
let's go back to
policies.
policies.
Okay. Trump has said that he is going to, on day one, end the Ukraine conflict with a phone call. Impossible. It's not going to happen. I guarantee you that Putin and Zelensky are laughing in his face when he says that. He says on day one, I'm going to end birthright citizenship with an executive order. Again, impossible. Would never survive the courts. He said that I'm going to drain the swamp in 6 months. Again, he was the chief recruiter for the swamp for 4 years. It will not happen. He had a chance to lock Hillary up. He promised that on his campaign I was so many rallies, lock her up. He said, yeah. And 2 weeks after he became the president-elect, he goes in front of a crowd and he says, listen, I didn't mean that. We're really not going to do that. And then the whole Russiagate thing happened. I'm like, that never would have happened if you had locked her up. You emboldened the left by not locking Hillary up. They realized you're a paper tiger. You're all talk. You're not going to get these things done. And so they came after your jugular, and look at all these problems. And we're still seeing the long-term effects of that.
Let's start with that point right there. One of the big issues for me is which candidate is going to fire everybody. And I mean that figuratively to a certain degree. I do want everybody fired. I want reviews. I want the bureaucratic state to be curtailed to a great degree. I don't literally think someone's going to come in, bang a gavel, and everyone's gone. But the question then is, who would actually do that? Is it going to be Trump or is it going to be DeSantis?
The question is, the way you could do that is, here's the biggest problem. The reason why they call the deep state is the deep state. It's these people that carry on from one administration to the next, that are employees. And it's very hard to get rid of them because if you try to fire somebody, then they appeal. And that takes many years, and they appeal again. So they can outlast any president, right? So what Trump had proposed earlier was this Schedule F idea, right? Mm-hmm. And he threw an executive order where he would be able to, if anybody of these government employees could be proven to be involved in anything politically, then they could be fired. The problem is that the courts will fight this. This will be challenged over and over again. It's going to end up in the Supreme Court, probably take years and years. Trump only has 4 years in there to do that. So I think that Governor DeSantis would also follow something along those lines. But Trump wants to build a big, better facility. I believe it's for the FBI in D.C. DeSantis wants to move them out, literally drain the swamp by draining the swamp, moving people out of D.C., getting them out of the 3 martini lunches, getting them out of that, whole thing. So I think DeSantis has got a more pragmatic approach to that. He says, listen, it's going to take me 8 years to do this. You can't just drain the swamp in 6 months. And, it's not like Trump doesn't have a track record on this. Trump has got a track record on that.
Okay. So he says that DeSantis wants to, take these swamp monsters and deep state agencies out of D.C. DeSantis has brought the swamp to Florida. Do you know that Ron DeSantis allowed for the Capitol Police to actually set up an official office in Tampa, Florida for the purpose of hunting down Trump supporters who attended the rally on J6? Florida has the highest number of J6 defendants. You can look it up. There was a report, I believe, in the Tampa Bay Times about this. And so how exactly is Ron DeSantis going to dismantle these agencies when he's bringing them to Florida to harass and intimidate and carry out their weaponized agenda against Trump supporters? And they have a coalition where the Capitol Police in Tampa, Florida are working in conjunction with the FBI and the local sheriffs in Florida, some of whom were even endorsed by Ron DeSantis, and they are hunting down Trump supporters to this day. I live in Central Florida, and one of the districts that's close by to me, it was previously in my district before DeSantis took it out, right? Because it was one of the more pro-Trump areas, and he didn't want me having a super pro-Trump area when I was running for Congress against total rhino Dan Webster. Citrus County, just a couple months ago, there was a January 6er who didn't even go inside the Capitol. Okay. He was just there. He was wearing a panda suit, walking around trying to talk about peace. And he had his home raided by the FBI in conjunction with the Citrus County Sheriff's Office, and they beat him. And that happened under Ron DeSantis's watch. There are videos, and we can play them here today. I've done an extensive report about this, of January 6 defendants. As I said, Florida has the highest number at any state in the country, begging Ron DeSantis for assistance, asking him to intervene about this weaponized government. But he has emboldened the Capitol Police and the January 6 Commission to come into Florida under his watch with his approval in Tampa to hunt down Trump supporters. So I take issue with what you said.
We had the Tampa Bay Times. I remember the story. It's a big deal. The the Tampa Bay Times says U.S. Capitol Police plan to open a Tampa office. Why? It's the first step towards geographic expansion of the notoriously opaque agency, which has been in turmoil since January 6th. Tampa Bay Times is not a conservative publication by any stretch of the imagination. That is a really good point, because I've talked about one of the strongest things DeSantis could do, and he did this to a certain degree, is say, I will not assist in the extradition of Donald Trump on these indictments. But this right here, actually, I think is a bit alarming, considering, I mean, the photos that have come out of, of some of these people.
Let's talk about January 6th. Okay, my problem with Trump is the constant drama, the constant unforced errors. Mar-a-Lago, unforced error. If he had just given the documents back when they asked for them, none of this would happen. January 6th, he knew 5 days before January 6th that Pence was not going to stop this certification. He knew that. He had requested National Guard troops. Why would he request National Guard troops unless he was afraid that there was going to be violence? He did not get the National Guard troops, and yet he sent his supporters to the Capitol and he said, fight like hell. He had said earlier in his speech,
peacefully
protest.
Bill,
He said
you're
peacefully.
but he said that, picking a bit here.
He said earlier in the thing, peacefully protest, but then when they were going, he goes, fight like hell. If you don't fight like hell, you're going to lose your country. And I had said, leading up to this, I was advising people, don't go to this thing because they're going to have BLM there, they're going to have Antifa there, they're going to astroturf this thing. Trump, like he does so many times, he leads us right into the minefield. And I was using the example of Patton before. You know, Patton was kind of an obnoxious SOB. Trump can be an obnoxious SOB, so that's not disqualifying. But if Patton had constantly led his troops into ambushes where they got wiped out, he would not be a famous general. Trump constantly leads his own people into ambushes. If Trump had not had the January 6th where there was no end game, and this is Trump's problem, he never has an end game. Where there was no end game, there was no winning scenario on this, that if he had not led the people there, we would never have had these J6 defendants. And he could have preemptively pardoned all these people.
I disagree with this. I think Donald Trump had the right to contest the election. He gave a commonplace political speech that is, widely the same kind of verbiage that Democrats use. I would say even less incendiary than most Democrats use. He had the right to be there and to press to the very end when the Electoral College slates were being submitted to Pence. And I believe 141 Republicans had the right to pressure Pence into returning the alternate slates of electors to those states that are qualified to review those slates of electors. And that is something that has been, done in 1961, is done at previous times. You can review alternate slates of electors under the Electoral College Act before they changed it. So he had the right to be there and to make his case before the American people. And the original altercation at the gates happened before those Trump supporters could have made it all the way to the Capitol after he said, go peacefully and patriotically, because Ray Epps and his buddy Samsel were there coordinating apparently to pull some shenanigans.
I personally think that
Trump, the important thing that you said earlier that doesn't really comport in my mind is that he did talk, according to the Department of Justice review, that he did notify the Pentagon, said that you're going to need at least 10,000 National Guard there. But if you go back and look at the testimony of Stephen Sund, you look at General Walker, the DC National Guard, they said because of optics and despite multiple warnings that happened days in advance, and I would argue the FBI knew months in advance that this was something that's going to happen. And if you go back to that infamous Time article, the Shadow Cabal had been planning this incitement narrative since May of 2020. So they had been working to fortify this election up to that point, and they rigged it in multiple ways. And I argue that Trump should have done more to prevent the rigging with these states, to try to get Bill Barr, who talk about drain the swamp, to go to these states and say, you need to push the state attorneys generals to defend the state legislatures' rights, etc. Right. So my point is that in terms of the context of the shenanigans around the 2020 election, Trump was justified in making a speech and making his case and politically pressuring Pence to do the right thing and to use whatever, powers that he could have that would be litigated. I think that's important context in a lot of this, that the recourse that Trump was seeking was through litigation. He wanted the Supreme Court to take up like the Texas case, which was mysteriously dropped because they had original jurisdiction. The context is he was seeking legal recourse. So Georgia's election indictment is a sham. He was seeking legal recourse because his end remedy was the courts. He wanted the courts to solve these problems.
And in fact, one of the interesting things to me about the indictment in Georgia is one of the furtherance of criminal conspiracy acts they present is that Trump said whatever legal means. Like they said he went to Brian Kemp and said, hey, let's figure this out by whatever legal means. I don't know the exact quote, but it was he said, I can't remember what it was. He said, hey, see if you can look into the fraud or get it done by whatever the legal mean is. Right. And they were like, that's a conspiracy criminal act to ask someone to legally go. And going after his lawyers is just psychotic.
I want to add too, people want to blame Donald Trump for January 6th, and you said that he could have done more. Well, how come we're not talking about Nancy Pelosi calling off the National Guard? And we do know that it was Nancy Pelosi who told the National Guard to stand down. And they also
I think you guys are missing the point of what I was saying.
Exactly right.
No, but we're not missing the point because
no, you are missing the point. I can tell based on your argument, you're missing the point.
You're not putting
I don't
into
think it wasn't
context.
Pelosi.
I don't think we actually know where the sound order came from.
We still don't have all the footage. Okay, that's one thing.
Yeah.
We would know more about this if Kevin McCarthy had actually released the footage like he said. We wouldn't have so many January 6th political prisoners locked up. And I think that, people would
Trump
have more
pardoned
sympathy
them.
for President Trump.
He could not have pardoned them.
I'm not sure if he
You can do a preemptive pardon.
Yes, but who? A list of names. You've got 800 people on one side.
He
of the
could have
building.
done a blanket pardon of everybody.
He could have literally wrote, "I pardon hereby everyone in D.C. outside of the Capitol is pardoned."
Yeah,
I don't think they were.
I don't think that would.
a president can preemptively pardon.
But he's got to be able to say their names.
Let me.
Yeah,
you're missing my. You're missing my point.
You can't just say like, I hereby pardon all people.
Let me clarify my point. My point was, what was in Trump's mind? Was there a possibility of violence in Trump's mind? Was that something that could have happened? Well, he requested all these thousands of National Guard troops. You don't do that unless you think there's a possibility of violence. And so he knew there was a possibility of violence. And yet he had his people go there, and he said, "Go to the Capitol and protest and fight like hell." When he knew there was a possibility of violence, and he did not have protection.
It's the most common
and there was a permitted rally
phrase.
outside the Capitol. They had a permit for it.
But what I'm saying to you, I'm saying to you is, Trump has got a very bad tendency of leading us into a minefield based upon his own hubris and his own narcissism.
The election is the right cause to take up, to fight,
but
the verbiage is not that incendiary.
But also there was no way. Let me put it this way: the January 6th rally, there were 1,000 ways it could have gone south. There was no way it could have worked.
That's exactly the point, and you're sort of indirectly proving Trump's case. He did not send a bunch of unarmed redneck extremists into the Capitol to tore the building or tore the U.S. government into submission. There was no capture and kill threat. In fact, the Congress had been originally shut down due to the pipe bomb threats at RNC and DNC. So the point is, there was no end game, and there was no collusion on the part of Trump with these extremists. He was the commander in chief. So he's not culpable for that.
But it's an important point. It's an important point. Trump was still speaking when the first group breached the barricades and stormed onto the Capitol grounds.
Well, the people that were the peaceful protesters there January 6th, I do not think were the people that were breaking windows and causing trouble and beating the cops.
That's true.
I think it was the BLMs, the Antifas, all these AstroTurf people. I was warning people. I was warning people for 2 weeks before this thing happened. Yeah. Don't go to this thing. They're going to trap us. They're going to AstroTurf us. We're going to be blamed for this. They're going to have Antifa. They're going to have busloads of Antifa and busloads of BLM. They're going to create the violence. And I saw the videos of people breaking windows. These weren't Trump supporters. These were guys with long hair, black backpacks. They're wearing a
I don't think
there was a memo to the Antifa. There was actually coordination to tell them not to do that, not to AstroTurf. And I know that John Sullivan was there.
Well, were these regular Trump supporters that were causing this violence? You think?
No, I think the FBI had plants inside of these far right extremist groups, and much like the Whitmer kidnapping, had kind of pulled them along to go and not stop them from going to the Capitol. They could have tamped it down. They could have stopped the Proud Boys and all of these groups from wanting to go to the Capitol, but instead they seem to aid and abet him. And you look at the police was crawling with undercover MPD. We know, the municipal police department, armed, by the way, some of them encouraging the Trump protesters. This is on video, by the way, to go to the Capitol. And on top of that, there was undercover FBI, and that's come out in trials too. And they didn't do anything to stop it.
And Trump was going to be there.
I want to make a point.
Trump is. Let me make this final point. Trump is the king of unforced errors. He is like a blind man in a field full of garden rakes. He's always stepping in it, always walking into it, always causing himself trouble, whether it be J6, whether it be the Mar-a-Lago documents, whether it be what happened in
I think he was too
Georgia.
nice.
I
all
think he
these
did
sort
the
of
right
things.
thing on J6 because he didn't
Yeah,
allow
jump in,
him to
yes.
get. Was he supposed to allow him to steamroll him?
I
don't think so. Not my
I
opinion.
want to fact check another one of Bill's lies. So Bill said just now that President Trump could have done a blanket pardon of all the J6ers. That is categorically false. As you know, President Trump was impeached on January 13th of 2021. Okay. They tried to charge him with an incitement of an insurrection. I brought notes to this because I knew you were going to say this. Okay. And ultimately, President Trump's term, as we know, ended on January 20th of 2021. And that's when the transition of power took place. President Trump was not acquitted until February 13th, 2021 by the Senate. The reason why President Trump wouldn't have been able to issue just a broad brush pardon of anyone connected to January 6th is because, and I'll read this directly, under Article 2, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, it states that there is an exception to the presidential power to pardon in cases of impeachment. The presidential pardon power does not extend to forgiving crimes and misdemeanors that the House might charge in a bill of impeachment. And they tried to
When did the impeachment?
for
What was the day of the
incitement of
impeachment?
insurrection. The day of the impeachment was 1 week after January 6th, which was January 13th, 2021, and Trump officially left office on January 20th.
And so he had an entire week to pardon him. and did not. Okay.
But I'm sorry. I do
No,
not
but
see a
you said-
reasonable
you
scenario.
said that he could have, and he couldn't. I'm fact checking.
He could have.
Time.
He could have. Couldn't have.
Anytime
He
after
couldn't have.
January
No, he
6th.
couldn't have.
He's not
You'd have to
managerial.
pardon everybody in the country.
He was
No, no, right.
completely
Well,
deplatformed
can't
2
just do
days
that.
after January
But
6th. He was
look.
debanked. He was shut down.
Let's-
Okay. He was silenced.
Let's think about this reasonably. First, we need a legal constitutional scholar to answer the question, can Trump sign a document saying, I hereby pardon all people within a 2-mile radius of the Capitol on this date? I don't think that's possible. The next thing is Trump would have to figure out who was actually a violent rioter and who was a peaceful, bumbling dotard who didn't know what was going on. So he's got a week, and they didn't even charge some of these people yet. So this is the issue.
You don't have to be charged to be
But that's
pardoned.
And so
but
Trump
that's
needs
the
the name
reason
of someone
why.
who was not charged. Of the 250,000 people in D.C., it's not possible.
But that's the reason why they impeached him just days after January 6th, because they knew this, right? The section of the Constitution that I just read to you, and they knew, okay, well, President Trump still has about 2 weeks or so to pardon people if he wishes, but by trying to impeach him for the incitement of an insurrection, it basically ended his ability to pardon anybody associated with what he was being impeached for.
Let's shift gears to the
No, you want to
250
shift
million.
gears. You wanted to
Let's
shift gears
to the
because I'm
250
proving
million.
you wrong. Because
didn't
I'm
prove it.
proving
You
you
haven't
wrong.
proven me
You
wrong.
just said something that was completely infactual.
I
So we can
disagree.
move
I
on.
disagree with you.
We should
I
talk about
disagree.
it, but
But
it's just
the
this
people
like
watching-
it's
let's
just this
shift
like
gears.
flippant narcissism of every single time that Laura fact checks me in real time and I get proven to just be an anti-Trump hater, I'm just going to change the subject.
Well, let's
We
leave-
can
let's
move
leave that for
on,
the viewers
but
to-
I just-
But let's
to agree with her.
shift gears. Let's shift gears to the $250 million that Trump falsely raised. He raised, after the election, he raised $250 million to create a fund to fight this steal. $250 million. Instead of, and he did not create this fund never existed. As a matter of fact, under testimony, Trump's own marketing people said this was just a marketing ploy. This fund never existed. He transferred all $250 million to his leadership PAC. That money ended up going to all kinds of things that had nothing to do with J6. He did not pay the legal bills of people that were in jail for J6. Who he did pay the legal bills for were people that were going before Congress to testify about J6. He paid their bills because he didn't want them to turn state's evidence against him. And then we know that Rudy Giuliani, who did all that work for Trump, traveling around the country, that Trump has stiffed him on the legal bills. He was supposed to pay Rudy Giuliani $20,000 a day. All he did was pay his travel expenses. And just recently, Rudy Giuliani was at Mar-a-Lago begging to get his legal bills paid. He didn't pay them. Well, also, it just turns
I
out
believe the RNC paid some of Giuliani's.
Coincidentally, shortly after Trump got this $250 million, his jet, which has been in mothballs for 2 years, gets a new coat of paint and some gold-plated
Speculation.
toilet
Come on.
seats.
Look, if Trump says he's going to raise money for fighting the steal or whatever, and then he uses that for legal fees for J6 witnesses, that sounds like he's spending the money on exactly what he should be spending the money on.
He didn't use it.
You just said that he
I
paid
said
the
that
legal
no,
bills
for the
of
people that were
witnesses.
in jail, He didn't spend anything for their
Right,
legal
but you
fees.
said he paid
didn't
them-
help to support their families.
He said you paid the legal bills.
That's not true. President Trump has had multiple events, and in fact, I was invited to one. He's going to be having several of the January 6ers and their families.
Where did the
$250
$250 million go?
But you just
Where'd
said
it
that
go?
he's not supporting the families or the victims of January 6th. On the 22nd of this month at Bedminster, I was invited to attend. I don't know if I'm going because I also am going to go to Georgia for the arraignment and cover that live. President Trump is going to be hosting a group that is supporting and providing money for lawyers to provide legal representation to
So
January
getting more
6ers.
donations in
And
to do something that he should have done for 2 years.
he also did his song "Justice for All," which made it to #1 on, I guess, the Billboard charts and also Apple Music charts. And he said that he was donating all of the proceeds
About
from that
$100,000.
song. I think it was a lot more than that
No, it
to the families of J6 victims. He's hosted them at Mar-a-Lago numerous times.
Why is this even necessary? Where did the $250 million go? I mean, $100 and something thousand for Melania's hair, paying bills for his hotel.
What should he do with the $250 million?
Well, there's the reports that there's FEC reports that show that President Trump has spent at least over $40 million on legal fees. So you're acting like he just pocketed $250 million. Okay. And you're also failing to mention that, there can't be coordination between campaigns and super PACs. And a lot of the money that was raised by the super PACs.
Why hasn't Donald Trump paid Rudy Giuliani's legal fees, where Rudy Giuliani's in deep trouble? Rudy Giuliani was
there was
Trump's
an agreement in the
undercover.
beginning. The RNC was paying for some of the RNC was paying for a lot of the legal fees until the presidential primary took place.
I'm sorry, who cares?
Right, I agree.
Trump stole $250 million.
No,
he stole $250 million. That is without
Ron DeSantis stole $200 million. He raised $200 million when he ran for governor of Florida, and those donations came from Trump supporters who thought that they were donating to Ron DeSantis. He broke records when it came to gubernatorial fundraising.
And he won by 20 points.
And he raised $200 million.
He won by 20 points.
And how you were losing. But now he's polling low.
Money. Let me finish and explain to you. He stole $200 million from Trump supporters because he lied to them and said, donate to me. I'm going to serve another 4 years as your governor. He lied to high dollar donors who wrote enormous checks of, 100,000, 500,000, millions, like Ken Griffin, for example, who just got exposed yesterday in an article for literally quid pro quo.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that, by the way.
These people gave millions of dollars to this committee while knowing that Ron DeSantis was, running for governor. And then what did he do after the gubernatorial race ended? He then had the funds transferred to the Never Back Down Super PAC, $82.5 million.
Right.
And then $1 million transferred to a PAC that was created just days after the Florida Speaker of the House, Paul Renner, changed the Florida Resign to Run law as a form of bribery.
So let me say.
So he stole money from Trump supporters.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't.
Yes, he
Okay,
stole. He stole at least $82.5 million.
If you go to a Trump
he
supporter,
stole that money.
You're
and
deflecting.
if Donald Trump says, I would like you to give me money, don't ask why. They're going to give him money. If Trump says, trust me, I'm working on some important things, they're going to help me, people would give him money. It doesn't matter. Trump supporters are happy believing that Trump is going to do whatever he needs to do with the funds. However, I do think there's an issue if Ron DeSantis is saying, I'm running for governor, not president, donate to me, and then transfers money so he can run against Trump. That feels kind of shady.
Trump specifically said, this money is for this fund. And he named the fund. And then we have under testimony, the fund never existed. That was a lie. He raised money for a fund. As a matter of fact, I would not be surprised.
What does that mean?
I would not be surprised.
What does that mean? He raised the money, so the fund existed.
No. There was a fund that they were going to create that was just going to be specifically to fight the steal. It was, I think, election integrity fund. I can't remember the name of it just off the top of my head, Ron, but it was a fund. And his own marketing people said that was just a marketing ploy. It never existed. They transferred the money to his leadership PAC. And people don't understand. A leadership PAC and a super PAC are two different things. A leadership PAC can spend money on whatever. They can spend money on Trump to do golf trips, anything. It's not like a super PAC, okay? So he transferred the money to these guys, and then God only knows where the money went. We know for a fact that they paid over $100,000 for Melania's hair to be done. We know that money that went to Trump's businesses and his hotels.
Just like we know that over $400,000 of Ron DeSantis's presidential donations just went to pay off his personal American Express card. So if you look at the financial disclosure forms, and I did an extensive report on this, there are American Express Express credit card payments that are not properly documented according to the rules as they're supposed to be documented in an official report. So you want to talk about Melania? What did Ron DeSantis
I want to talk about
spend?
the $250 million.
I want to talk about. I want to talk about. I want to talk about.
American
I want to talk about Jill DeSantis' trips to Gucci with their campaign American Express card. Let's talk about that.
Let's shift
it's
a little.
Jill.
We'll shift a little bit because otherwise we're just going back and forth on the money, and Kyle wanted to jump in.
So I think that we could say that both of them have moved the money away in ways that some of the original donors disagree with. I think that we can say that because politics, the circumstances have changed for both DeSantis and for Trump. We don't know exactly what triggered DeSantis' decision. He may see trouble ahead for Donald Trump ultimately becoming president and cares about America enough to want to come forward and run for the country. So that may be Ron DeSantis' rationale. I will leave it to Ron DeSantis to, explain that. But I want to explain why I supported Ron DeSantis originally leading into this debate with Laura. And, everything changed when these political indictments started coming down the line. Every time there was a Biden scandal, there was a political prosecution. And, you go back to August with the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, we saw that Biden had a classified document issue come up in November, just prior to the midterm elections. He covered that up completely. That is a blatant cover up. Nobody talks about it. That came out. Biden still hasn't been indicted for this, and there's no.
But he's a sitting president. He can't be indicted.
Well, there's a special counsel who's supposedly investigating this. There's no headway. It's just radio silence. Yeah, exactly. That's true. Exactly. So there's radio silence on all of that stuff, and every time starting in late March. All the way up until August, even with the Georgia indictment, last week, there's just been Biden scandal, Trump prosecution, or Trump indictment over and over and over again. So my point is that if we were all thinking about how the Democrats were going to rig the election like they did in 2020 with like the COVID, with the mass mail-in ballots and the Zuckerberg boxes and all this stuff, they're rigging it right now in front of our faces. That's my viewpoint. This is election interference. This is rigging the election.
Let me ask you a question.
And so, just really briefly, Bill. Mm-hmm. So, my point is that if the situation has changed, and on August 1st, DeSantis came forward, put this mealy-mouthed statement, just like he had said in North Carolina rallies and so on. Very lukewarm, sort of, I'm going to drain the swamp, and he's even said stronger things recently, like, this wouldn't have happened to Donald Trump if he would have drained the swamp, etc. This really aligns him more with the GOP establishment that I'm comfortable with, because the thing about Donald Trump that is really highlighted to me, not just the deep-seated corruption and vindictiveness and nastiness of these deep state actors, is that the GOP establishment is not stepping up to do any meaningful actions to defend Donald Trump. They are sitting back and they're on vacation. They're giving these little statements. Oh, we're going to investigate this. We're going to investigate that.
These strongly worded letters are very.
I take it back. The Democrats are very. Just a second, Bill. Okay. I'll get to the end point and I'll set you up. Okay. So my point is they're rigging the election right now in front of our faces. And if we don't support Donald Trump, then they're going to continue to select our candidates from every election from now to the end of time. We need to punish the Democrats, or alternative scenario, bring them out of the hiding, out of the shadows, and expose the democracy of America as a sham. Let's peel the Band-Aid off. Let's see how nasty these actors in DC are. And let's let the American people, who are, some of them are still asleep, see just how much of a complete illusion our process is. Donald Trump is the first candidate since, I would argue, Reagan versus H.W. Bush, to be not the GOP establishment pick. And I think that when he won, and he shocked them, and Hillary Clinton, who had tried to rig that election as well with the Steele dossier, etc. He really we saw big tech mobilize.
Right.
We saw this endless lawfare mobilize now. For me, it's really proven me right in my argument for the last 15 years that people like Barack Obama and his advisors, John Brennan, who was a communist before he was a CIA director, they have a plan to undo freedom in this country. And Donald Trump understands this, and he's more vocal about it. I did believe Ron DeSantis was Trumpism without the drama for a lot of it, and I believe he had better bureaucratic skills to excise a lot of these bad actors out of our government. Yeah. I think that's true, and I heard your counter argument, Laura, and I agree that
Trump is going to excise bad actors.
What you said was disturbing.
What
did he do for 4
policies
years?
are totally different, right? That's what I said in the very beginning about him being this Manchurian candidate, and I agree with what you said. Where's the Republican Party on this? They're just completely MIA on vacation. And I will say, you're always saying, "Oh, you never criticize President Trump." One thing that I was very critical of President Trump over, and I'm his biggest supporter, is his endorsements of Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy is just sitting back, allowing for this weaponization of government to happen. He's done absolutely nothing except issue this milquetoast statement, and he's actually supporting Ron DeSantis. I call out Marjorie Taylor Greene, and the reason why she calls me crazy, and the reason why she
a lot of people call you crazy.
I don't care. It's, as President Trump always says, it's the outsiders who change the world, and I'm an outsider, and I'm proud of it. I don't want to be a part of their club in the GOP establishment, And so the fact of the matter is she has formed an alliance with Kevin McCarthy, and I have exposed the fact that Kevin McCarthy is anti-Trump, and that's a threat to her because she has falsely presented herself. No, but this is important, Tim. As an ally to President Trump, Kevin McCarthy has refused to endorse President Trump for Congress or for president. Okay,
nobody's endorsing him.
He has come out. No, there's the entire Florida congressional delegation endorsed Donald Trump. What are you talking about?
How many of us former cabinet members? How many of us former
I got to make a point about
how many former chiefs of staff endorse him?
I broke a story a couple of months ago about how Kevin McCarthy was actually directing his donors in the Central Valley and Silicon Valley in California to host high-dollar fundraisers for Ron DeSantis, and it was actually at one of these fundraisers where Ron DeSantis said that he was against President Trump's policies with China, particularly as it relates to tariffs, and that he doesn't support tariffs. And we now know that he doesn't support tariffs because all of his biggest donors are, people tied to Sequoia, like Doug Leone, Ken Griffin, who, is a billionaire because of his investments and his business dealings in China. We now know from a report that came out yesterday, of course, that he was working with Ken Griffin to modify this law that he said was going to ban Chinese nationals from purchasing land. And now we know that Ken Griffin was able to just donate $5 million to him and completely change that.
I want
to make one point on Congress.
Is that we need to start calling them out. Where are the Republicans in Congress? I'm calling on Marjorie Taylor Greene to issue a motion to vacate. We need a Speaker of the House that's actually going to stand up for President Trump and stand by him instead of working with state GOPs like Kevin McCarthy just did in California, where he worked with Jessica Patterson, even though he denies it, to have, this delegate heist. And if it wasn't for me, they probably would have stolen a nomination.
Yeah, I'm going to get a chance to actually talk again here because I've been sitting here for about 10 minutes without saying anything.
We need to call out Kevin McCarthy and House leadership.
All right, so let me make a point I want to bring up. Mike Cernovich tweeted that right now the Republicans control Congress with a comparable margin that Nancy Pelosi did. The question is, why aren't they doing anywhere near what Pelosi had done?
Yeah, let's talk about Mar-a-Lago, for instance. Okay, and Trump says, well, I'm protected by the Presidential Record Act, which obviously means that he doesn't understand how any of this works. What the Presidential Record Act says is that the sitting president, is required to keep personal and presidential records separate. When he leaves office, the presidential records become the sole property of the National Archives. He can take his personal records home. What Trump is saying is, anything I take with me becomes my personal record. That is incorrect. Also, if it comes to national defense information documents like the Iran war plan, okay, those cannot be.
He wasn't indicted for that, though. Right?
Yes, he was in superseding indictment. Yes, he was.
A superseding indictment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So with the Iran war plans, these are. It doesn't matter whether they are declassified or not. He cannot take these out of the secure facility where they were in the government's property, take them home, and he cannot show them to people like Susan Wiles, who is a consultant for the Chinese.
That's not true. That is not true.
Oh, her consulting firm doesn't do work with the Chinese?
Susie Wiles only consults for American companies, and she's affiliated with a lobbying firm. She's not responsible for every single client that they take on.
Regardless, she is not authorized to see these documents.
You said regardless. You just lied about her. So you should correct the record. You just lied about her.
Okay,
she doesn't represent foreign nationals.
You're going on the record saying she has nothing to do with the Chinese.
She herself, from my understanding and my knowledge, is not directly involved with the Chinese.
Okay, I've read about 10 articles to the contrary. But anyway, but she is not authorized to see these documents. And Trump went on Brett Baier, looked us in the eye, and he said, I've never seen this document. I've never heard of this document. I don't know what this is. I never would have had General Milley do this. And he lied to our faces like he's done so many times before.
He's innocent until proven guilty.
And then he's on the record.
We don't have proof of that. Like he's not been convicted.
They indicted him for this because they've got evidence that this was what he did. It wasn't just a real estate, plan that he was waving around.
No.
This was actually the Iran.
If we're looking at any one of these indictments, these are novel legal theories. By all means, I'll say.
How are these not? The Espionage Act is not a novel
No. There's a lot of charges brought against Trump that are novel legal theories about what is free speech, if we look at Georgia in particular. But my point is simply, just because a weaponized DOJ says Trump is hereby indicted does not mean Trump lied or is guilty of any crime.
Okay. When the DOJ, Trump could have given all those documents back right away. But the problem that he had was not only did he not give them back, but when they were under subpoena, he had that one guy, I can't pronounce his last name, move the documents around. And then he said to his lawyers, okay, go back to these guys and say, hey, you've got all the documents. He had his lawyers lie for him. And that's why the lawyers...
President Trump is protected by the Presidential Records Act.
It was a process crime trap. That's my
But more importantly...
He's protected by the Presidential Records Act.
Outside of any...
You don't even understand what the Presidential Records Act is.
You are citing...
Yes, I do.
You are citing
Yes,
DOJ indictments, not convictions or hard evidence of proof.
How is he protected by the Presidential Records Act?
They've made accusations against Trump for which he's been indicted. He has not proven to do anything you've claimed he's done.
Right, he's been indicted for these things. Okay.
And that doesn't mean anything. Okay. I mean, look, when they claim that Jenna Ellis...
the documents back, this is Trump's problem. Look, Trump's problem is he knows the left is out to get him. He knows they're very sneaky. Okay. And yet he walks around with a target on his back all the time, constantly stepping into these bear traps. I'm sick and tired of that. As one of Trump's top advocates for about 7 years, it's like, I've had enough. I'm done with this. I don't need this guy that is constantly. I don't need the guy who's
I'll say something real quick.
Ego. I don't need the guy that has the intelligence to understand legislation.
I'll say one thing real quick, and then Kyle. Last night, Sean Spicer was talking about how he was a witness in the Mueller investigation, and that it cost him 6 figures to defend himself, not even as a target, but a witness.
Right.
And how does that happen? He said, because when Mueller says, I want to talk, you could say something seemingly innocuous that they could interpret or use as a crime against you. So you have to pay lawyers to handle your communications. You could say something as simple as, well, when I was texting my friend the other day, I mentioned, that's a violation of the Presidential Records Act. We got him, ladies and gentlemen.
How does texting your friend violate the Presidential Records Act?
Sean Spicer. No. Hold on. The point I'm making is, for one, that's what Sean Spicer said he had to call his lawyers about. Whether they're going to charge him or not, they can take anything you do and argue it was or wasn't a crime. The saying is, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. The point is, there's no way to avoid. Look at Michael Flynn. He wasn't even being investigated and said, he lied to us, now we got him. If my point is simply this, that the claims, the indictments and the allegations against Trump have not been proven. I don't trust a weaponized DOJ, especially when we know Hunter Biden is involved in illicit business dealings. We know Joe Biden there was a request made by Devin Archer to contact, not Devin Archer. There was a request made by Burisma Partners for Hunter to contact, quote unquote, DC. Then we get a month later, Joe Biden flies to Ukraine to personally engage in a quid pro quo, fire a prosecutor in exchange for $1 billion loan guarantee that he doesn't have the authority to do. When you have that stuff going on and we have whistleblowers coming out saying Hunter is protected, I'm not going to err on the side of the indictments must be true claims against Trump. But I don't want to rant. Kyle, you had a point.
No. So that kind of goes to what I'm saying. So I don't blame Donald Trump for the extreme actions that his adversaries have taken against him since he first came down the escalator. First of all, the Russia collusion hoax is one of the most disgusting acts of betrayal by a intelligence community and law enforcement community that I've ever seen. We don't need to rehash that here. I worked for Sean Hannity. I had to cover this for 2.5 years.
And Trump's DOJ did nothing about it.
Not just our law enforcement, but also a president at the time. It began. People never want to talk about this,
Obama,
but it began with Obama spying on him, and the media is complicit in this. When President Trump was interviewed on 60 Minutes, I believe it was with Leslie Stahl, right?
I think
he had said the Obama administration had been illegally spying on me during my entire campaign. So you said that, if President Trump would have just, locked Hillary Clinton up, you're failing to mention the fact that the persecution of Donald Trump and the traps to attack him that have now turned into this, coup with Crossfire Hurricane and now all of these phony indictments and this witch hunt, it all began while he was still then just Donald Trump.
He was just
right?
campaigning.
And Donald Trump was president for 4 years and in charge of the DOJ this entire time.
That's a valid argument,
This
Bill.
entire time. And
Let
they didn't do anything against any of these people. This is Trump's problem. Trump is constantly getting himself into trouble, constantly moving into unforced errors. He's constantly surrounding himself with the wrong people. Here's the thing. We originally thought that Trump, because we saw him on The Apprentice, we said, well, here's a guy who will hire well and fire well. Okay, but we forget that was just a TV show. That wasn't reality. And Trump surrounded himself with some of the worst possible people. And one of the reasons we
That's
did
one
is
thing that you and I can agree on.
I agree as well.
Worst possible people. Okay,
Sessions
so here's my number one gripe against Trump. It's not the crimes. It's not even the childish sophomoric calling people meatball. What is he? 12 years old? Okay, not even that. But it's the lack of judgment, the poor judgment that he's shown over and over and over again. I mean, he has been indicted these situations. He's got this special prosecutor that's after him. He's got these judges, this DC judge, this Atlanta judge that are not going to be friendly to him. And he's out there calling them racist and calling them. It's like, what has he got, a death wish? I mean, these are the people that could cut plea deals for him. And my situation, my overarching situation is that I do not believe, we just had a new poll come out the other day, and I'm no fan of polls. I don't want to give you the impression I'm not a fan of polls now, but a new poll came out the other day. There was an AP poll that said that 64% of Americans will not vote for Donald Trump.
I don't believe that.
Okay.
But,
Yeah, I don't
but
believe
let's
that.
go back to the Russia collusion thing. I just wanted to briefly do a little breadcrumb. We had the Russia collusion hoax, the Mueller, no collusion found.
Those are all BS.
Again, in the Mueller, you see the process crime trap that they tried to set with the obstruction of justice. Ultimately, he decided that, it wasn't his place to bring that charge, and that he gave like this editorial in part 2 about, all of the supposed obstruction of justice, which was highly speculative. So you go from that to the sham first impeachment was an absolute disgrace in hindsight.
I will not disagree with you on those things.
And Donald Trump was legitimate in asking the Ukrainian president for any information that he had that Biden and his family were compromising U.S. national security. That was his obligation and duty as president.
You're not going to get an argument with me that impeachments are bad. Okay.
But I'm trying to set up the pattern of behavior on the part of his adversaries. We have January 6th where we both had a very good argument about that. My stance is that Trump was justified in standing up for himself. He didn't objectively do anything that you should be charged for as president. And he was ultimately, this is almost double jeopardy from my point of view. And I think it goes back to the novel theory. He was president when this happened. He had, sovereign immunity, or presidential immunity, as we call it in the United States, to some extent. I know he was campaigning, it could be portrayed as campaigning, but ultimately the Senate said that there was no conviction of him in the Senate. So ultimately, in my opinion, that was a sham. And then all of these indictments, which we touched on earlier, and we've discussed, are all a sham as far as I'm concerned. They're novel legal theories. They're untested at the highest levels of the courts, in my opinion. So I think that I can't fault Donald Trump if anything, he's shown how horrible our system is right now. Yeah. If it wasn't Donald Trump, it would be somebody else.
I appreciate it.
I want to address a point you made.
Okay.
I want to start. So we'll shift the conversation.
But I want to say something.
You said that in a poll, 64% of people would not vote for Donald Trump.
Of the overall general. And this is just one poll. I'm not a fan of polls.
Right. So my response is, should we not then, based on that argument, be getting behind Vivek Ramaswamy, who is currently second place in the prediction markets? He's got a few polls.
Prediction markets are,
He's also second place in several polls as well.
Okay, the prediction markets have Biden beating Trump by like 30 points. Okay, so the prediction markets.
Right. So would you get behind Vivek Ramaswamy now that he's ahead of Ron DeSantis?
In this poll?
This is the prediction market. And
well,
we also
now in New Hampshire, Chris Christie's ahead of Ron DeSantis now as well.
These people in these prediction markets are not betting on what's going to happen next November. They're betting on, who's going to. It's like. But I'm not just saying just as one source. I'm saying we have several polls showing Vivek in second place.
All of a sudden, he's not a fan of polls, right? That's a funny thing. It's
I am not saying Vivek is going to win. My point is, Vivek is currently in the press.
Let's talk about.
in the polls,
I think
doing
RCP
better.
Let's talk about real
is
quickly
more accurate
how
here, but
powerful
there was an
is
outlier
how powerful is the
recently.
MAGA base. We've seen this in poll after poll after poll.
Very powerful. Without them, Ron
Okay,
DeSantis never would have been governor.
Poll
right?
after poll after poll. We've seen this where they do an actual heat map of the people. People say, well, who's your preferred candidate? This early in the process, it's really mostly a name recognition thing because most people are not engaged. Okay, they don't care about politics. They're not engaged. But what we've seen is that Trump has got about 25% core ride or die support, about 25% never Trump, will never vote for him, and about 50% that are kind of on the bubble. Well, if after 4 years of his presidency and all this other stuff, and Trump being a 100% name recognition guy, half the people are on the bubble, that's like dating someone for 6 years and they come to you and they say, I think we need to see other people. It's not going to end well for you, okay? These are people that are already looking for an exit ramp, but they don't know who that exit ramp should be.
That's
so
not
they're still
true.
defaulting to the...
It's not true. It's not 20%. It's not 20%.
I think it's more like 30,
20%.
40.
The only Trump base, the people that are only going to vote for President Trump, and they're not going to show up to vote regardless of who the nominee is, unless it's President Trump, right, on the GOP ticket. It's about 45% of GOP voters.
That's preposterous.
It's about at least
That's preposterous.
and
You have no basis for that
That's
number.
people who admit it.
You
That's
have
people
no
who
ba- you
admit
have no
it.
basis for that number.
That's
Opposition
people.
baked
That's
into the
people
cake.
who admit it.
There's a lot of Biden opposition baked into the cake. So if you do the head-to-heads of Biden versus Ramaswamy versus DeSantis and versus Trump, they have very similar numbers. And so it's all within the margin of error between
we've seen
Trump
about
and Ramaswamy
six
and
different
DeSantis
studies that have
versus
all come out and
head-to-heads.
said this 25, 50, 25 thing. Seen it over and over again. I don't know where you get your 44%. Okay. But if you say that, and we also see that really right now, the entire electorate is about 25% GOP, 25% DNC, and about 50% independent. So 25% are ride or die Trump, 25% are GOP. That means
a lot
about
more
6.
than
That means about
25%.
There's a lot of
6%.
Trump supporters
That
who
means
aren't
about
GOP,
6.
but
That means about 6% of the electorate are ride or die Trump. Okay, so what does that mean? So for Trump to win, he needs to win the independents, the middle vote. I tell you what, I don't
And
know
the
who you
swing
talk
states
to,
specifically,
but the people I speak to with independents, Trump has got a real serious problem, especially the suburban moms and so on and so forth, because it's a stylistic thing. I've had so many women come up to me and could you recognize me from TV or my show or whatever? And they say,
not true.
and
And this is
it's
one of
not
the reasons
true.
I supported
It's not true.
DeSantis.
Bill's
not
recognized
true.
quite a bit. That's true.
Okay,
Even
but
on the
suburban
litmus
moms, that's
test,
just
if you-
absolutely not true.
if you
There
take the
are
litmus test of the
record high numbers,
2022
record high
midterms,
numbers of
and the
suburban
guys
moms
that
turning
Trump-
out to vote for President Trump. Record high numbers of suburban women, okay, and many other demographics as well. And young women, especially millennial women, turning out to vote for President Trump.
That's why he did so well with his endorsements in the midterms.
He did.
You know,
He did.
He did.
I don't.
He did.
Well,
No,
in terms of
all he
Senate-
did. Let me put it this way:
Yeah, Senate
in
and
the
the swing states
battleground,
were
in the
terrible.
battleground states, he lost like 60 to 70% of those, and the ones that matter, the endorsements that he did well with were ones
he's
where he
saying
was
that
going
he
to.
lost 60% of his endorsements. That's just not true.
Master,
He's getting
Walker,
away with
Oz,
lying.
all were
He's
disasters.
getting away with just
Oz
making
was a
crazy
disaster.
lies
Yeah.
against
Okay.
him.
I'm going to
Just
say it again.
ridiculous
I'm going to
lies.
say it
You
again.
just said- you
She's
just said
talking
that-
over me, so I'm just going to say it again until she stops talking over me.
He just said that 70% of Trump's endorsements lost. That's not
That's
true.
not what I said. I said of his endorsements in the battleground states, the tough ones, he lost those. Look at it was either 60 or 7%. I don't remember the exact number, but he lost those. The ones that he did very well in were like he did over 100. But these were the ones that he was going to win, whether an endorsement or not.
Right. And here's the issue with this. It doesn't matter if it was Trump or a block of provolone cheese. With mass mail-in voting and ballot harvesting and the operation that Democrats have pulled off since probably 2016, to be completely honest, and have improved upon with 2020, Republicans are making the mistake of fighting an idea battle or a personality battle, while Democrats are fighting a procedural battle. And when you look at who was it, Frisch in Boebert's district, almost winning.
Yeah, that was close.
How is it close? Well, it's simple. The ground game that Democrats have, the laws they changed and maintained on the books since 2020 gives them a massive advantage. Universal mail-in voting, one of the biggest mistakes Republicans made in Pennsylvania, probably on purpose, mind you, because they don't like Trump. Mm-hmm. When you have an urban district, and it's almost entirely Democrat, or a suburban, you go to the suburbs, you can go to one door, knock on the door, and say, fill out the ballot. You walk 10 feet, you're at another house, you knock on the door, fill out the ballot. That's how they're getting massive suburban votes. For the rural vote, which overwhelmingly goes Trump, you have to drive. Like the nearest neighbor here, it's going to take you a 10-minute walk. So for the Republicans to get on ground game to find their base and convince voters in rural suburban areas is very difficult. But the key battleground being the suburbs, Republicans did not have the logistical apparatus. Democrats are winning procedurally. I don't think it matters. We're arguing, is Trump popular enough? Look,
Trump's not gonna carry-
no,
Trump
you
can't win
get
the-
a thousand activists in the suburbs, and you will get people to vote for Trump.
And the obverse of that, I was an associate field director in the Tea Party wave for a congressional candidate in a blue district, and for Nan Hayworth, and I had to knock doors and I had to do phone calls, but I was one of the first ones to mobilize the Tea Party outreach and was able to thread the needle of getting the Tea Party people on board. But you see, the GOP establishment sucked the activist energy out of the conservative Republican base by hijacking the Tea Party. Like Paul Ryan and all of these, they led us down a blind alley. There were, of course, some grifters involved in the Tea Party.
They did it in 2020 as well, though.
And so, this is why I think Trump is exposing the GOP is in a lot of cases, and the term controlled opposition has been around, but they're like the Washington Generals.
Right.
I love that analogy. They're there to be
Let's look at the
beat up by
scoreboard, guys.
by
Let's
the
look at the
Democrats.
scoreboard, guys.
And the
And the last-
consultancy class is a huge problem with the Republicans. So that's why I've when DeSantis made this pivot to try to thread the needle against Trump in the light of all these outrageous indictments, it shows me that he's a little bit not ready for prime time.
Okay, let's look at the scoreboard.
He needs to forget the consultants.
DeSantis,
His campaign management
5-0.
is in shambles.
Oh, I completely
and that
agree.
shows me that his leadership of his campaign, he's being too much of a politician.
Yeah.
He needs to have a spine, go out there and really more forcefully. And I know he's trying to thread the needle here with the DOJ weaponization and drain the swamp and stuff like that. It's not needed right now.
To his point,
he needs to step up to
DeSantis
the
5-0, Trump 0-5.
We can talk about the
Scoreboard.
debate too, Bill, because I thought you had some interesting points
To
on
Kyle's
that.
point, that is true. And there was a memo that actually ended up getting leaked, I believe, to the New York Times yesterday that proves exactly what you just said.
Yeah, that's not real.
It actually is real. How
No,
are
it's
you
not
part of
real.
the DeSantis
Explain,
campaign?
Bill.
What?
How would you know if it's not real? Are you part of the DeSantis campaign?
I'm not a part of the DeSantis campaign, but I know for a fact that he's not going to.
It is real. It came from Jeff Rowe. So this memo, okay, and Jeff Rowe is a part of the Never Back Down PAC. And as we know, Never Back Down is basically Ron DeSantis
It's not
because they're
real.
illegally coordinating. Yeah, they are. Ron DeSantis's campaign is broke, as we know. And Never Back Down is footing the bill for all of his expenses, including his bus tour in Iowa just now, because Ron DeSantis doesn't have enough money to get himself through this election. He raised $20 million on the campaign end, okay, transferred the $82.5 million from his state committee to the Never Back Down PAC, and then they raised about $30 million additional dollars on that side. He spent $1.5 million, and you can look this up, it's all factual, each week in the 5 weeks since he first filed to run on May 24th till, I believe, July 1st, which was the first FEC filing deadline, which means that, if you do the math, okay, he had already spent about $8 million and he had $12 million cash on hand. $3 million was reserved for the general election. And the FEC actually recently just sent them a violation letter because his campaign accountant didn't even properly report on those numbers, okay? And so Jeff Rowe, this memo came out and he said, okay, so you're just going to have to pretend to advocate in support of President Trump. The strategy at the debate, because you're going up against Vivek Ramaswamy, who has actually showed up. I organized the rally in front of the Miami courthouse when Trump had his arraignment. Vivek Ramaswamy was the only other GOP candidate for president who showed up to take a stand against the weaponized government and committed to pardon Donald Trump. So Jeff Rowe goes, okay, well, Vivek is going to outshine you on this, so you're going to have to pretend to defend Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And then after you win the primary, after you win the primary, right, you can go back to not being as pro-Trump. Just like we saw when he had his kickoff event in Miami, Florida, and there was a secret recording of the donor meeting where they said, what's your position on abortion? And his advisors and donors said, well, the governor, he only signed a 6-week abortion ban in Florida to appeal to voters to win the GOP primary, but we're actually going to take the Clinton approach of safe and legal abortion. Right. So he doesn't have policies. He's doing what the DC consultants and the establishment strategists on Capitol Hill are telling him to do. And people are recognizing that.
The Florida abortion law is a huge albatross.
Let me ask a
in swing
question.
States, unfortunately.
But DeSantis has already come out and said, I'm not for a federal abortion law, for instance. And here's the thing. It's really, a ridiculous premise because there's as much chance of the moon crashing into the earth tomorrow as a a heartbeat bill appearing on the desk of the president.
It doesn't
that got
matter
through
what
both
he
houses,
thinks.
the House,
But it's what
and the
he
Senate.
stands
So it's
for.
never
He's
going.
It doesn't. No, but Tim, it doesn't matter.
Perception
It
is
doesn't.
reality in the swing states.
That's really a mute point because it doesn't matter.
Moot
if Ron
is the word, by the way.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Ron DeSantis isn't in support of a federal abortion law because it's thanks to President Trump and his appointments of 3 Supreme Court justices. We now have overturned Roe v. Wade, and so abortion is now a state's issue.
Right.
So you're trying to
Well,
you're
let me-
trying
I wanna ask a
to defend
question.
Ron DeSantis with a point that really has no substance or.
Opinion question for where we're at.
It's not. It's not a federal issue. How is it ridiculous? Do you understand what?
I
Do you
understand.
understand
I
what?
completely understand.
Do you understand what the
But I'm
overturning
saying
of Roe
to you
v.
is-
Wade actually
yes,
did?
I completely
we get that.
understand.
Let's-
But let me just say this one. Let me say this one thing. It is a states' rights issue, and this is why it's what the Democrats are going to try to do is demagogue and say, "Oh, if DeSantis is president, he's going to try to make a federal 6-week abortion ban." It's never going to happen. So DeSantis has been clear about that, but he needs to continue to be clear
All right.
about that this is not a federalized issue.
Well,
so we're in agreement on that.
But
Right,
he,
so-
but
so
he
let me-
neutralized his advantage in swing states
No.
with that.
What he needs to do
okay.
is he needs to get
I'm
behind the
gonna ask a
president
question
that actually
which pertains to this.
resulted in
Okay.
the removal of.
A broad question. Why has Ron DeSantis tanked in the polls? A year ago, he was the favorite 2-1, and now he's in some polls 3rd place, typically in 2nd place.
Yeah,
Why
well,
is
you got to
polling
understand.
going
You got to
down?
understand how polling works. And a lot of people don't understand how polling
please.
works. Oh, please. Okay, here's how polling works. That for a poll, you may wonder how can you do a poll of 800 people and have that represent 169 million voters, right? How is that possible? Well, it has to be scientifically random. What that means is that you've got to randomly call 800 people to get a response that equals what the population looks like. That used to be possible back before we had caller ID and cell phones. But now that we have caller ID and cell phones, you don't get an 80 to 90% response rate like is required. You get less than a 6% response rate. So what does that mean? That means these pollsters are all reweighting these polls. They also have a tribal behavior where nobody wants to have the big outlier poll. They all want to come in the same range. In addition, a lot of these polls are registered voter polls.
That has nothing to do with it.
well,
It's
my
the fact
question is,
that
why is it?
It's
Look,
the fact that
well, I'm trying to-
there's
I'm
no
trying to-
such
I'm
thing as
trying-
a
the art-
DeSantis
right,
base.
right,
Okay,
let me-
there's a Trump base,
Yes,
and the only
but-
reason why Ron DeSantis was ever, a known entity after he won his election as governor is because of Donald Trump.
Right, but
This is
let
a
me
guy-
address this.
But I'm explaining the answer right now. I'm telling you the reason why
So
he's plummeted in
DeSantis
the
won by
polls.
20 points when Trump was getting his butt
He was
kicked all over the country.
he was a no-name congressman, okay, who nearly got
DeSantis
beat
won
by a
re-election by 20
crackhead,
points.
who nearly
He took
got
a
beat by a
state that had
crackhead
an
known as
advantage
Andrew
of the
Gillum.
Democrats of
And if it wasn't for
250,000
Donald
people,
Trump,
okay, you're gonna
and
let-
turned
and if it
it
wasn't
into
for
an
Donald
advantage of
Trump, if it wasn't
350,000
for Donald Trump
Republicans.
endorsing his failed campaign, and I will say it was Matt Gaetz, okay, and if we want to understand who was the person responsible for Ron DeSantis, it was Matt Gaetz who told President Trump to endorse Ron DeSantis.
DeSantis
Ron
won
DeSantis-
re-election
DeSantis
by
did.
20
Hold on,
points.
He
Hold
pretended
on.
he only became popular because he pretended to be pro-Trump. He dressed his kids up in onesies. He ran campaign commercials saying that he was going to pretend build the wall with my little toddler with Legos. You know, he pretended to be a Trump mini-me, which is why people liked him and possibly considered him to be a potential heir apparent to Donald Trump.
And he
when
won
Donald
by
Trump
20 points
wanted
3 days
to-
after Trump called him
wanted to pass
Ron
the torch.
DeSanctimonious.
And
3
then
days
he
after
lied to
Trump
the voters of Florida.
anti-endorsed
He said he wanted
him,
to
won
be
by
governor
20
for
points.
another 4 years,
Wait.
and he stabbed Donald Trump, the man he owes his entire political career
Baloney.
to, in the
Baloney.
back.
All right, hold on.
This is not the mafia.
So let's
He's an
actually
ingrate.
answer.
He's an
This is not the
absolute
mafia.
Take a
ingrate.
look at the
And
answers
all
we
the
have
money
right
in the
now.
world isn't going to
Laura's
buy him the
arguments-
personality transplant
Right,
that he
okay.
needs. Okay,
Laura's-
he's on the spectrum, and he's never going to
Okay,
have
okay,
the
that's-
personality
that's-
or charisma that Donald Trump has.
I agree with the charisma thing, but let's address this. Your argument is that Ron DeSantis had tremendous support because he was like Trump and behind Trump.
He pretended to be like
now,
Trump.
But we need to get to this point. You mentioned procedural issues with polling.
I was trying to get to my point, and you guys cut me off on the procedural issues with polling. So what we've got is, I have seen pollsters turning out polls I have never heard of before, and I follow this stuff for a living. Who are all these people?
But this is my question.
These pollsters are all trying to make a buck. Who's paying for the polls?
Wait, hold on.
Every pollster should have to say who paid for my poll.
Right, I
It's
get
the
this,
media
but
and the Trump
are you
campaign.
arguing that DeSantis is only doing bad because pollsters are out to get him?
I'm arguing that the polls are wrong.
Ridiculous.
But why would
everything's
everything
wrong?
So why would
Everything's wrong.
So how? Okay, look, I understand the polls are wrong. I agree. We saw, I think it was a 7-point swing in the wrong direction in 2018. No, I think it was like 13.
Hillary's ahead of Trump by 16 points 3 weeks before the election in 2016.
So right now, so you can make the argument that they oversampled Democrats in many of these polls, which is one of the big arguments as to why there was that swing and why they were wrong in supporting Hillary. But if it's an internal GOP poll, wouldn't they favor Ron DeSantis?
Which internal GOP poll?
No, what I'm saying is if the polls are asking Republican voters who they support, why would there be a bias towards Trump?
Because you don't understand that most of these polls, if you have a poll of just registered voters or adults, God help us, about only with 2020 accepted, typically only about 54% of registered voters vote. So that means that about half the people,
doesn't mean anything.
Please listen. Yes, it does. Means about half the people that are responding to this poll are not, they're low information voters. They're not engaged. So when the pollster calls them, if they do answer the phone.
That is not true. So is
if
it
they do
the
answer-
official position?
when the pollster calls them, when they do answer the phone, they're going with the name they recognize. They don't recognize Governor DeSantis.
And when the voter goes into the voting booth, it'll be the exact same.
But we got a million years before they go into the voting booth. Now, also,
and that wasn't
my
question. My question was, why is he going
down?
down? He was higher in the polls. Now he's going down.
Thank you for admitting that Ron DeSantis doesn't have name ID.
Yeah, with more name.
Thank you for admitting
with more name. Right. Good point.
But what I'm saying is, you're trusting the polls. You should not be trusting the polls because there's all kinds of weighting bias on here. And this is the amazing thing: the polls are wrong year after year after year, and still we say the polls. Look at what Trump.
But all of these different polls are trending generally the same way. So
that's because
systematic. You're saying there's systematic error?
Yes, it's a tribal thing. You guys really need to do some research on this stuff.
No, I'm sorry. I study it.
No, we don't need to do research on anything. It's so sanctimonious. It's so sanctimonious.
Hold on.
Let's talk about Trump.
Let me address your point.
Donald Trump has a 50-point lead. Okay, this is ridiculous. He has a 50-point lead nationally right now. Yes, he does.
Let me address Bill's point.
Yes, he does.
It does not.
Polls in the 30s.
If you want to talk about margin of error with polls, okay, 4%
let's talk about the
here and there.
actual polls.
Okay, fine.
You don't understand how polling works.
I do understand.
Let me address the point he just made. You're saying that the polls today are wrong, but that makes literally no sense. If the polls 6 months ago favored DeSantis, that makes no sense. If they're going down now, the only explanation is something politically is happening. You can't say 6 months ago the polls were right, but now they're wrong.
Let's talk about, because I've already tried to explain this to you about how polls and how you can't trust polls.
Okay,
now.
so why could you trust the polls 6 months ago when DeSantis was higher?
I'm not saying you could trust the polls 6 months ago.
So DeSantis has never been leading. DeSantis was never leading.
He was never leading.
But my argument is that these pollsters would to support your argument, they would have to be independently biased against DeSantis all of a sudden.
They're trading
these
pollsters coordinate and talk to one another all the time.
No, I'm saying like in terms of what you're saying, they're all trending together independently so that you can make an argument of systematic bias, but it doesn't explain the wide margins that Trump has over DeSantis and DeSantis going the wrong way. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, the polls. Listen, here's what we think.
I agree. DeSantis was never ahead. It was always
fake. He's a Manchurian candidate. Okay, he's a Manchurian candidate.
We love the fact that you people on the Trump side are trusting these polls. You're just like Hillary before 2006. I don't need to go here. I don't need to go there. I'm so
okay.
We love the fact.
It's just so disingenuous.
Let him finish my stuff. I'm saying this is why she never gets on my spaces.
Okay,
I don't want to go on your spaces, Bill.
Make your point.
I'm a known entity. You're a nobody. You are a grifter who made your entire career off of pretending to be a Trump supporter, and then as soon as times got hard, you stabbed him in the back. I'm loyal. Okay, I'm loyal.
You're trying to flood America down the drain.
I am a loyal person, and I have stood by President Trump.
Let's not have you guys argue with each other.
You're trying to nominate a man
I
who
don't want
cannot
to
win the
go on
general
your
election.
spaces. Let's get that clear. I don't have any desire to go on your space.
Okay. That's why
you don't have any reach. You don't have any impact. I'm breaking stories that are actually impacting the national election. I was with President Trump this weekend. You're not doing anything of significance, Bill. Understand that.
Okay,
because you keep on using that as a dig. I don't want to go on your space.
We don't need to have ad hominems.
You
don't need to say that in the waiting room.
Understand, because you lied about me. You called me QAnon when you are the QAnon grifter. I have never supported QAnon. I have so many photos on my phone that I could pull up right now that show you supported QAnon.
Let's talk about something real as opposed to the polls, because I made my point on the polls.
The polls are real when Ron DeSantis is leading.
I want to bring up a point.
All of a sudden,
let me talk about Iowa. Let me address what you said, and then we'll go to Iowa.
It's so ridiculous. You have to admit. it.
One of the things you just said is you Trump supporters believing these polls. And one of the issues that I've taken, as anybody who watches my show, when a year and a half ago, I was hanging out with the Daily Wire crew and said, I voted for Trump for the first time. I didn't vote in 2016. Now I'm thinking Ron DeSantis because he's Trump with tact. He's younger, he's energetic, and I think he's got it. And then earlier this year, I said, I feel like Trump's revenge bent was more likely to result in firing, but I'm 50-50. When I was supporting Ron DeSantis, not a single Trump supporter insulted me, attacked me, lied about me.
You're not in my feed.
Yeah, so I have these Trump supporters come on the show, and I say, I'm leaning towards DeSantis. And you get people like Matt Gaetz saying, no way, Trump all the way. And that was the worst of it. The moment I made one point, I made one point about Jazz Jennings in Florida that was not in any way an attack on Ron DeSantis. His actual campaign staff attacked me on Twitter. What is it with the DeSantis base that the moment I say something like, hey, Ron should have done a thing, it is a relentless barrage. And I'm not the only one to bring this up. Again, shout out to Mike Cernovich. He's experiencing the exact same thing. You bring up criticism of Trump. I know Mike Cernovich. I can say on my show, all over the place. I can say on my show that Donald Trump should be investigated for the commando raid in Yemen that allegedly resulted in the death of an 8-year-old American girl. And Trump supporters don't attack me or insult me for it. Okay. They can say, well,
let's talk about one of your
similar.
friends, Alex Brushwitz. In his feed the other day, he says that I look like an aging lesbian. Okay.
What does that have to do? This is my point.
But is he wrong? Is he wrong?
Did I look like an aging?
Okay,
once again.
No. I'm not attacking. I asked the question. I never said I agreed. I asked him, is he wrong?
I knew you 6 years ago. You look nothing like you looked 6 years ago.
Why are you bringing up Alex Brushwitz when my point is the DeSantis surrogates and campaign are attacking former or potential allies? I don't care about Alex Brushwitz, and I don't care about your arguments with Laura. My issue is many people have noted that Christina Pushaw, Redfern, Brian Griffin, many of his actual staffers are attacking people who should be his allies. Exactly. Why?
Where are they?
Why did Brian Griffin, Jeremy Redfern, and Christina Pushaw start insulting?
This is how tone deaf the Trump camp is.
I'm not Trump camp.
The Trump camp is so toxic and attacking all the time with all these various lies. You said,
and there it is. This is my point.
You said that Casey DeSantis faked her cancer.
I never said that. I said she exaggerated it. I said she exaggerated it.
The inability.
This is your point.
No. I'm sorry, dude.
And this is a turn off to a lot of people who are trying to make up their minds with rational reasons.
I said she exaggerated it.
I supported Ron DeSantis.
She can say that Casey DeSantis had
that has nothing to do with
me
or my cancer.
That has nothing to do something about that.
No,
I'm just thinking.
No, you're talking about me. This is the issue I have. I don't care about what Laura said to you. I don't care what Alex Brushwitz said about Christina Pushaw. Why are they insulting me and other potential and former allies for no reason? And then you immediately go, but Laura Loomer, I don't care. My issue is, I go on Twitter and I said there was a video of Jazz Jennings getting all of these surgeries in Florida. And I said, wow, is this happening in Florida? Where's Ron DeSantis? The simple response from his communications team should have been winky emoji. We're working on it. And I'm like, awesome, because I had no beef with DeSantis and I was in support of him. Instead, they called me a moron, an idiot. They said DeSantis doesn't have a time machine. It's not possible. And they lied. Jazz Jennings got trans surgery while Ron DeSantis was governor in Florida. I don't understand why all of a sudden I'm getting a barrage from his campaign staff and from his gubernatorial staff when all I said was, where is he? I didn't insult him. And then what happens? I put out a tweet saying, will Ron DeSantis stand by his words to not extradite Trump? Again, all of the fans, they start insulting me. They make deep fakes about me. And when I say, guys, why are you attacking me? They just call me insults. And then when I speak to even someone like you, you go, but Laura Loomer. I don't know what Laura Loomer said. I don't
know what people say to you. I don't. The
question is, why are there?
I'm under assault all day, every day. Why are there so many people? By Laura Loomer, by Alex Brushwitz.
I'll answer the reason why. I'll answer your question.
Diminishing her
cancer
journey.
Let me ask real quick, just for clarification.
I'm a cancer survivor.
Right.
I take offense by what she said.
And I don't know what she said.
My question is this: be an adult and get over it. Everybody gets offended. It's called free speech.
In this campaign,
it's called free speech.
Okay, let me ask this question. In this campaign, there are many people who are potential or former allies of DeSantis who have been insulted and attacked by his fans, his surrogates, and his staff. My question is, why?
Why? Okay, let's see. 3 days before DeSantis' reelection campaign, Trump calls him DeSanctimonious. Then he starts calling him meatball. Then he says that he's a rhino.
He
Then he
actually
says
didn't call him meatball.
Then he says that he's a globalist. And
But
then
why am I being insulted because of that?
DeSantis
What does that have anything to do with you guys attacking Tim
DeSantis
Pool?
camp fights back.
Fighting
and everybody's
me?
like, and then everybody's like, oh,
That has nothing to do with
that.
That's not the reason why
This is what-
Tim Pool had an issue with Christina Pushaw. You're
This is
trying
the
to
problem.
deflect and
This
say
is
it's
the-
about
this is the
Trump.
problem
They
that-
attacked him and then they
Why am-
stole
why
his
am-
footage.
This is the problem with the entire
Yeah, they did.
Trump.
They stole his
This is
footage.
with the entire Trump team. They have a terrible case of dish it out, but can't
Oh, we
take
can
it.
take it. I can take it.
Now, this is my point.
I'll take you to the mat with a
sitting
slam
here-
dunk any day.
I guarantee you, nobody says
Christina
anything about you. They don't
and
say
Jeremy
anything about me.
Redfern personally tweeted at me, insulting me. And I was like, I'm 50-50 between Trump or DeSantis. And now I'm like, I first of all, I will not throw DeSantis under the bus because he has awful supporters, but I will criticize him for having terrible campaign staff. He should have fired Pushaw a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, this whole idea, this whole I can dish it out but can't take it.
Yeah, I
Nothing
did
to
not
do
dish
with
it out.
it.
Trump
He
is.
didn't
Trump
dish it
is. Let me
out.
put it this
He
way.
asked a question.
Let me put it this way. Trump,
asked a question.
Trump is the
Dishonest.
embodiment of toxic, and this is what I think is kind of amusing. Is that Trump?
We are not talking about that. We
I have
asked
no
you
idea
to
what
address.
people
We
say.
asked
This
you
is
to
my
address
point.
this. We
This is
asked
my
you to
point.
address
Let me-
this.
Let me just make this point very simply. The question I'm asking has nothing to do with DeSantis and Trump supporters insulting each other.
Yeah.
The issue is
Why was somebody mean to you? I don't know. People
Why
are mean
would
to
Not
me.
just somebody.
Hold on. My point is this. Why is it that when I say I'm in favor of DeSantis, the Trump people desperately try to persuade me? And when I say,
my God.
yes, you know what? I'll put it this way.
Maybe that's your fee, but that's not my fee.
Absolutely.
truth
And
on
my
our
point
side.
is this. I'm not the only one who's made this point.
Right.
Several other prominent personalities have brought up DeSantis staff surrogates and supporters attack them, and Trump supporters woo them.
Oh my God!
So,
Seriously, I'm sorry. I just need a moment. I need a moment here because that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my
meetings
life.
with Governor DeSantis, and I did go to one. And I thought it was in good standing with her. I wrote one article that was
Were
critical.
these the social media influencers where they were paying people? Did you ever get offered payment, by the way?
No, I didn't get a
Okay.
payment.
Folks, I'm going to look right in the camera. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this right now. I'm going to look right in the camera for everybody that follows
Just a
me
second.
on Twitter.
Bill.
Is these are people that like Trump now apparently, who are saying that Trump are just wooing us and being sweet and DeSantis is being mean. I know you're laughing at your phones right now because we know that is not even remotely.
So my point is that I went there, I covered the COVID accountability summit that he had in December, and I was on support of him, and because I really wanted COVID accountability for a lot of these pharmaceutical companies that I argue fraudulently advertise their products and shouldn't have gotten liability
Are you
immunity.
talking about the grand jury?
Yeah.
I have
an announcement of that. So my point was I thought everything was fine. I go back. I remember reporting, I pride myself to be independent. So I reported a critical article of DeSantis. The next thing I know, Pushaw has unfollowed me. There's radio communication silence. And, I've talked to, some of his spokespeople and I think that they're, well-meaning, good people in general. I can say that in terms of Pushaw, her behavior somewhat mystified me.
I don't work for
Hey,
the
Tim.
I will add one thing real quick.
Uh-huh.
Last year, as I mentioned, I'm on the Daily Wire hanging out with these guys. We're talking about why DeSantis was the right choice, and Trump supporters are asking us to come on the show. I make one criticism of Ron DeSantis, not even a strong one. I said, where is he? And they've banned their campaign staff and supporters from coming on this show to the extent that they can. And you're shaking your head, but it's
I'm
a fact.
sorry.
It's a little
This
thin-skinned.
entire argument is beyond laughable. I mean, take Alex Broshowitz, who's one of Trump's top guys, and read his feed sometimes. It is obscene. Look at the things that Laura Loomer says. It is
Everything
obscene.
I say is factual.
Okay, no,
Everything I say is factual.
You're saying
Wait.
it's factual that Casey DeSantis
is
over
The nastiness has
over-
been there's been people with sharp elbows on both sides.
And now let me say,
I get it, but let's not do this whole thing.
But Tim, I want to
Let's not
answer
do
the
this whole
question
thing
that he didn't want to answer.
Let's not do
The
this whole
reason
thing.
why-
I'm talking right now. Let's not do the whole thing where Trump is all brightness and light and sugar,
I'm not even saying
and
that.
the DeSantis team
one said
is all
that.
evil and mean. Okay,
See,
No,
this
let me
is
put
this is this is what I can't.
Here's what happened. That Trump had dangled in front of Laura Loomer a job offer, right? And then Trump's team came and said,
What does that have
listen,
anything to
she's
do with
way
this?
too toxic.
That's not
Marjorie Taylor
true.
Greene said that she's crazy.
That's hearsay.
And then
That's
you
not
have
true.
gone on Twitter and you have accused the Trump team of being backstabbers several times.
No, I
on
said
Twitter.
that there are people that work for President Trump who I think are leakers. Clearly, that is the case, given
And
the fact that they
backstabbers.
leaked
And
to
they-
the
'cause
New
they
York
stabbed
Times.
you in the back.
Because that was a private meeting, and he didn't
And
dangle a carrot.
he threw you under the
He
bus.
didn't throw me under the
He
bus.
threw you
You're
under the
not
bus.
privy to the
He
private
embarrassed- he
conversations
embarrassed
that
me in
I
front of
have
my-
had
because
with
you're
President
too
Trump.
toxic. When you are
I'm
too
not-
toxic for Trump,
Let me-
you are beyond toxic because Trump
So,
is the
so if I
embodiment
was
of
too
toxic.
toxic for Trump, why did he invite me to sit in his presidential suite with
Because
only
he's desperate.
Okay, but we don't need
He's
to
not.
make this.
Okay, Trump-
But
you
I
guys
wanted to
argue with each
actually
other.
answer your question. And look, unlike people like you, I'm actually loyal. And so, yeah, it was unfortunate that certain people on his staff.
I'm loyal to America, not to
I don't
Let's-
care about loyalty tests.
But let
I
me
would say that's my goal.
just say this.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it was unfortunate that certain people on his staff decided to leak a private meeting to the New York Times in an effort to try to sabotage me. But at the end of the day, my loyalty to President Trump and the America First movement is greater than my own ego. And I could have easily said,
loyal
you know
to
what?
America, not to a
I
man.
could have easily said, you know
And Trump's
what?
bad for
I'm going
America.
to turn,
Let-
I'm going
let-
to turn, I'm going to flip. I'm not going to support him anymore. But I've stayed loyal. And I would love to work for President Trump. I really would. I would love to work for President Trump. And I agree that he's hired some bad people. I would like to help him have better discernment on that front. As an investigative journalist, right? I would love
You're not
to
an
help
investigative
President
journalist, you're
Trump.
an ambush journalist.
I am an investigative
You're
journalist.
an ambush
okay?
journalist.
I
We
worked-
don't. Let's.
I worked for Project
This is-
Veritas. I was undercover in the Hillary Clinton campaign, and my
You're an
videos were
ambush
used
journalist.
during the debate.
You don't get both
That-
sides of the
I
story.
wanna
You just
explain-
ambush
argument,
people.
not an argument.
I want to tell you, okay? And I want to tell you that the reason why they get so nasty towards you is because Ron DeSantis really wants state media in the state of Florida. There was actually a bill that was proposed by a legislature in Florida who was endorsed by Ron DeSantis. You can look it up, and it was called the Blogger Bill. And they wanted to, in preparation for Ron DeSantis running for president, they were hoping nobody was going to notice this so that like the Resign to Run law, they would be able to pass it through and not have any pushback. Okay. The bill stated that if you wanted to even talk about Ron DeSantis positively or negatively, you had to get approval from the state first and get a license in order to actually write about him. So, and then if you didn't have the license, you would be in violation. Look it up. It's a blogger
never
bill.
heard of this.
And so
Blogger
look
bill,
it up.
Florida?
It's called the Florida Blogger Bill. So Ron DeSantis wanted to make it so that you had to get a state license to talk about him or else you'd be fined. And so then when this came out, people were like, oh my God, this is what you see in like communist countries. And then Ron DeSantis had a press conference and said, well, you know, a lot of legislators use my name and I don't even know this guy.
That is a complete misinterpretation
I don't even
of that.
know this guy that did the bill. Meanwhile, he endorsed him. He literally endorsed
Complete
the guy for
misinterpretation
re-election.
of that.
It's actually not. It's actually
Yes, it
not.
is.
There were people on the right and the left that criticized this. So they're so angry, Tim, that you're asking questions because you have the largest live YouTube show every night. Did you look it up, the Blogger Bill? Do you need me to find it?
I did. It was a state senator, Republican state senator in Florida, introduced the bill.
And he
called
was
the,
endorsed by DeSantis, and
information-
DeSantis lied and said he didn't know. Read the bill so people know, because I don't want to be accused of spreading fake news. This is real. This happened.
Quote, if a blogger posts to a blog about an elected state officer and receives or will receive compensation for the post, the blogger must register with the appropriate office within 5 days of the post, the legislation says.
Now but there's more to you. It
defines the
specifically mentioned
officer.
DeSantis's name too, and it said you had to have a license.
The bill proposed would require bloggers who write about state officials to disclose who's paying them. It would require bloggers to write Florida bill would require bloggers who write about the governor and legislatures to register with the state.
Told you.
Right. Okay.
So let me
So that's
answer.
state media.
I want to address what you said.
Let me throw
I need to finalize the point here about what I was bringing up.
Let me just.
No,
just
no,
give me
we
one
want
second.
I wanna
to
keep- I
hear
wanna keep it on
Tim. We want to
track.
hear Tim actually keep it on track. So go ahead.
And then we'll throw it to you.
Okay.
So I don't know about that's why they came after me. I think
that's
the
why.
issue is Christina Pashaw is just not good at her job. And they decided, and there's even a lot of corporate press arguing that they decided the approach they would take to criticism or dissent is Twitter flame wars. I think they're just saying we're going to war with anybody who criticizes DeSantis, and that's been a bad strategy.
But that's why, though, because they were hoping, okay, in this legislative session.
Is there a glitch in the matrix? Am I living in an
because
alternative
I actually
universe?
wanna
I mean,
talk
where I
about-
am under assault
I actually-
24/7 by these.
I'm not
Trump
talking
people.
about you.
Okay.
We're not talking about
But
you. You're
let me address-
narcissist.
let me address-
I know you're right that they're coming after you.
Let me address this bill that you guys are talking about. Now, the key point of that bill is not just bloggers, but bloggers are being ding, 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 paid for what they're doing. So basically what they're saying is
No.
these bloggers are an infomercial
It's
okay,
not
that's
about,
a paid
it's not
information.
about whether
So
you're
what
getting
they're trying,
paid.
yes, that's what the bill
No,
is
it
about.
said if you're getting paid or if you're writing about the governor.
No,
you
if
have
you're
to
getting
get,
if
you have
you're
to
getting
register
paid to
with
write about the
state.
governor, let me
have
make
to-
it clear.
you have to
If you're
register
getting
with the
paid,
state.
Transparent
so
about
it's
that.
a
It's
not just
basically
about
it's a
if you're getting
basically
paid. It's not just about if you're getting paid.
basically
I'll pull it up.
it's you're creating an infomercial against Governor DeSantis or whatever you're doing.
You should be able to do whatever you want. It's called freedom of the press.
But if you're being
It's called
paid, but
freedom
the
of the
whole idea
press.
is if you're representing yourself as an independent blogger, okay, just stating your own opinion, that's fine. But if you're being paid by somebody to say things, you need to reveal that, hey, this is a paid. It's like an ad for a campaign ad. At the end of a campaign ad, they always say this ad was paid for by such and such campaign. The problem with these bloggers is they are not admitting they're being paid by a Trump
It's a way to
PAC.
control.
But-
if the
but hold on.
state if Governor DeSantis
You're
is the
ignoring
governor,
the point of the law.
if
What can I
he's
say?
If
She's ignoring the point of the law.
Governor DeSantis, and we have an exception here, right? Because it's not every day that the person running for president happens to also be the governor of the state. He controls the Republican Party of Florida. As we've seen, he runs the Florida legislature like a mafia. He had his chief of staff. Check this out, Tim. His chief of staff for his official gubernatorial office, James Uthmeyer, is now his campaign manager for his campaign, but he hasn't officially resigned his position as chief of staff. He's taking a leave of absence. You are not supposed to be mixing official taxpayer business with your official campaign. And so do you really honestly think that it's going to be fair in a presidential election year when Governor DeSantis is an absentee governor but is still in control of the state of Florida and he gets to appoint the people who are issuing these licenses? No, it's a way to control and
Wrong.
and
You don't
limit
understand the law.
dissent. I
Well,
do
just like you don't
understand
understand
the
the
law.
Presidential
I do
Records Act.
understand the law.
Let me add this.
I do understand it.
You don't.
It's
This
a
is
violation of press freedom, and President Trump has never
right.
done anything like this
I
because he
don't-
can actually handle the media.
I don't agree with the intent as you're describing it.
No,
but
I'm saying that it shows that
understand.
they don't want dissent,
But
and
I will,
that's why
I will
they
point out
attacked you.
this bill is bad.
It is.
It says that a blogger who is compensated or will be must register with the state.
It's compensated. So
So the issue is if I write a blog and then later on someone says, hey, we like the blog you do, can we hire you? Even though the blog's already written, I have to then register with the state.
But the whole idea is if you know that you're writing this with the intent
I get that.
of getting paid. Okay.
It's bad.
Okay.
It's a badly done executed.
Okay. Let's talk about Iowa for a second. I want to ask, why is Trump on a suicide mission in Iowa? He has insulted Kim Reynolds 3 times now. Bob Vanderplatz, who is literally the evangelical kingmaker.
No, he's not. He ran for governor 3 times
He's
and
the
lost 3
he's
times.
the kingmaker.
And he took a bribe
in
of
Iowa.
$50,000 from the Never Back Down PAC.
The last 3
He lost.
people that
he
won
lost.
hold on.
Iowa were endorsed by Vanderplatz. The president of the Senate has endorsed DeSantis. The House Majority Leader has endorsed DeSantis. Dietz, who is a big Iowa guy, has endorsed DeSantis. So all of the leaders, and let's talk about endorsements for a second. How many of Trump's former press secretaries have endorsed Trump? How many of his former chiefs of staff have endorsed Trump? How many of his former cabinet members have endorsed Trump? If I was an executive recruiter for a long time, I did reference checks on people. If I had done a reference check on Trump based upon who he's worked with, I would have to.
But let's go back to
ask the
Iowa.
employer, don't hire this person because
Tim,
everybody that he worked with
let's go
hates
back.
him.
Let's go back to Iowa, and I want you to finish.
Iowa.
Yeah, what's
We
the
have-
Iowa point?
The thing is about Iowa, President Trump, according to polls out today, President Trump is up 26.1% in Iowa. He wants to say that Ron DeSantis is supported by Bob Vanderplatz. Yeah, of course he's supported by Bob Vanderplatz because as I exclusively exposed in my investigative report, Bob Vanderplatz received a $50,000 wire transfer from the Never Back Down Super PAC, which is the official super PAC that is supporting Ron DeSantis. And Reuters actually confirmed my reporting in a report they published on August 12th. And President Trump commented on it yesterday. And he didn't disclose that. So remember when Bob Vanderplatz was like, oh, Donald Trump doesn't want to come to my forum where Tucker Carlson's going to host. He never disclosed publicly that just days before hosting that forum, Never Back Down paid him $50,000 so that he could support Ron DeSantis. And now, right, he's walking around with Ron DeSantis, taking him to church. And he says that Vanderplatz is a kingmaker. Well, if Vanderplatz is a kingmaker, how come Ted Cruz isn't president? Vanderplatz endorsed Ted Cruz
But
in
Ted Cruz
2015.
won. The reason why,
But
the
if
reason
he won Iowa, I mean, Kingmaker's
I'm
a
going to
little
say one
strong.
last thing.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Vanderplatz ran for governor of Iowa 3 times, and he was rejected all 3 times by the voters of Iowa. Okay, so Ron DeSantis was at the Iowa State Fair last weekend. He was flipping burgers and putting toothpicks into eggs, and there were people that didn't even know who the hell he was. And Donald Trump cucked his ass by flying his plane over the Iowa State Fair, and he is not a
He spent 45 minutes on the ground and left.
Donald Trump is not a
What do you say,
carnival.
get a
Donald Trump is
personality
not
or
a
something,
Donald Trump
Ron?
is not a carnival ride, and he is not a food stand, and yet he was the most popular attraction at the
No, he
Iowa
wasn't.
State Fair.
No, he
Yes,
wasn't.
he
All
was.
fake.
So,
All fake.
I'm
There were
from
people.
Iowa.
There were people
Fake.
in Iowa chanting, "We want Trump," as Ron DeSantis was
Yeah,
awkwardly
like 5
walking
people.
by.
I'm
okay?
from Iowa. I
5
love you,
people. Do
Iowa.
we
This
need to
isn't
put the
about you
videos up?
personally, but the Iowa caucuses and
Please.
for the GOP has not meant anything. We had Huckabee in 08, and then we had Santorum after that in 12, and then we had
Yeah,
Ted
but it's
Cruz
a-
in
it's-
16.
guys, it's completely
but let me go to
different
your
now.
point, because originally my argument was that we have to support Donald Trump because of what his enemies are doing to him, because the election's not really don't. Well, it's overstatement a little bit for the sake of argument to say they don't really matter if we let their attacks on Donald Trump stand, because look at what happened with Fani Willis, the DA, the original documents, and I know the judge hasn't signed off on it yet. They wanted to have the trial start on March 4th, the day before Super Tuesday. And Super Tuesday, if you go through, Donald Trump is gonna, so it wasn't before the other primaries in February. It wasn't before Iowa. It wasn't before New Hampshire. It wasn't before South Carolina.
maybe
It was before
maybe
Super
Trump shouldn't have
Tuesday.
called her a
Trump is
racist.
gonna
It's the most
Maybe Trump shouldn't have
It's the
called
most
Fani
important-
Willis
the most
a
important
racist.
day.
Maybe he
Yes.
shouldn't be
The
taunting
Monday.
the
And in the
prosecutors
news
and the
cycle, the
judges.
day before
Maybe he
Super
shouldn't be
But
doing
not just that. Not just that.
That's what she wants.
They want the
I'm not saying
trial.
it'll
The problem is
to
Trump has
start-
got no
they-
judgment. And he does stupid things
They want the
constantly
trial
and
to
gets himself
start
in trouble.
on
It's
Monday.
not his fault, though.
They
in my
want the
opinion.
trial to start Monday, the day before Super Tuesday,
never
for 2
Trump's
reasons. They're going to put it in the news cycle, but more importantly, it hinders Trump from campaigning on the most important day.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
It's the same
And it
thing
hasn't been
that's
signed off
This
on.
is the problem. This is the problem with Trump.
But
This is the problem with Trump. Trump knew after 2 impeachments that he's got a target on his back. The Democrats will do anything in their power to take him down. So what does he do? He takes these documents home to Mar-a-Lago. He subpoenaed to get these documents back. He lies to the DOJ, has his lawyers lie to the DOJ, so much so that he lost client-attorney privilege and asked his attorneys to commit a crime. Did all this stuff. Unforced error after unforced error. None of this Mar-a-Lago had to happen if he had just given the document. And what earthly use did he have for these documents?
It is the most
And he
serious
said-
indictment, but
and he
it's a
said-
process crime
But he
trap
said
that they
he
ran
said
on him.
he said that all of these
Compare it
documents
to
they were all
Hillary,
mixed
compare
up.
it to Biden, it's
He said
paper
that I
toys.
didn't get them back because my personal documents were all mixed up with the presidential documents. First of all, you were required by the Presidential Records Act to not mix your personal documents with the presidential documents.
What's the
That is in
difference?
the presidential record.
What's the difference between the two?
What do you mean?
Like, what's a presidential record versus a personal record?
A presidential record is a record that is created like a daily briefing, like it's created for Trump by other people,
But he
not
didn't
Trump.
have
that he
them in a
created himself.
closet where
what's hold on,
Chinese
what's
actors
but
could
what's a
access
personal?
them,
What's a personal
you know?
record?
A personal record would be like, photographs of him shaking somebody's hand and so on and so forth, golf clothes, mementos, and so on and so forth. Those are completely different. And the presidential records, but here's the thing. Trump has not been indicted on the Presidential Records Act because violating the Presidential Records Act is a civil action. It's not even He has been indicted on the Espionage Act, which is taking these documents home, especially these national defense documents, taking them home and not giving them back to the part of the Espionage Act says that when the proper party asks for these documents back, if you've got them, you've got to give them back. He did not. He obstructed justice. These documents were under subpoena and he did not give them back and he lied about keeping them. This is another
That's not a
unforced
reason
error,
for him to not be
unforced error,
president.
Unforced error, unforced error after unforced error. The man has no judgment. He knows let me put it this way. He knows the Democrats are out to get him. He was impeached twice. He knows it. So what is he doing out of his hubris and his out of control narcissism, which he's got a problem with? What is he doing? He's taking documents he has no earthly need for. He's thumbing his nose at the DOJ, thumbing his nose at the Democrats.
Which DOJ?
Begging them to assault his home and take these documents back. He's begging them to do that. It's absolute foolishness. January 6th, he knew there was a potential problem because he wanted National Guard there. couldn't get him there. Once again, he knew there's no end game. He knew there was no way, talking to Pence 5 days earlier, he knew there was no way that Pence was going to send that back to the states. And yet he sent his people to the Capitol anyway. Now, were all of his people involved in the violence there? I don't know. I think it was mostly astroturf there by the Antifa and the BLMs and the FBI agents, stuff like that. But he put his people at risk. And this is what Donald Trump does. Out of his hubris, out of his narcissism, out of his need to be number one, he constantly puts his own people and supporters at risk. We don't need that in the White House.
So let me I want to address this. The reason why none of that has any meaning to be completely honest. Like I do agree, Trump has made a ton of mistakes, and it is frustrating sometimes.
And they're unforced.
But when they indict Trump on all that stuff, I don't get mad at Trump. I get mad at them. In fact, it makes me 100 times more angry with DC, with the political elites, because Hillary Clinton destroyed a public server. She had her people smash phones with hammers,
and Trump let her off the hook.
And absolutely, and these things were under subpoena as well. So now I'm looking at this machine that is lying every day about everything, and these indictments do nothing to make me view Trump negatively. It makes me view them more negatively.
Hey Tim,
I want Trump to go in and just
I tell you
rampage through the ivory tower.
I want to make a point about the documents.
If the other field has laid out a minefield, and you take your family on for a picnic,
I'm mad at the people who laid the minefield.
Yeah, there you go.
What?
Hey, Tim,
I'm mad at the people who laid the mines.
You can be mad, but if you don't understand the Democrats are evil and out to get you, and Trump understands that, he walks right into their trap.
Let's see how evil they really are.
He walks into their trap.
I want to make a point. I want to make
Laura.
a point about this. So you're saying that he walked into the trap. Well, it was a trap, but look, every single president since Jimmy Carter has had the assistance, right, from the National Archivers with packing and leaving the White House, with the exception of President Donald Trump. And so this was a setup, okay? Usually the National Archivers are supposed to have a process where they go in, okay, to the White House with the president and the transition team, and they help them pack up documents so that things like this don't happen. And they didn't do it with President Trump, if you recall. It was completely politicized.
They have a history of setting him up. They set him up by not giving him debriefings on the Russian targeting. They did not get. They allowed the security debacle on January 6th that Trump tried to warn them about. The Pentagon ignored him. The mayor's office fought.
He walked right into it.
He didn't walk into it. He told them have 10,000 National Guard troops. He didn't order them
on January 6th. On January 6th, there were 1,000 things that could go wrong. I was warning my friends. Don't go to this thing. I felt like Adderall Akbar. It's a trap. It's a trap. Don't go to this thing. And so he led us once again into a trap, and bad things happen. The man has got no sense. He's got no judgment. We need a president who's got judgment. President Trump has got no judgment at all.
We've said it 20 times. We've talked about January 6th a lot.
President Trump has got no judgment at all.
So we talked about January 6th a lot, but I want to say one of the biggest issues I find that is making some people, undecided in this is the issue with COVID-19. And so I want us to talk about DeSantis and Trump with regards to COVID-19 and the vaccines, because I do know that, there's a lot of fake news about Ron DeSantis's record. And as somebody who lived in Florida, right, I find it egregious that the media wants to create revisionist history and say things like Florida was free, Florida didn't have lockdowns, that Florida didn't shut down people's businesses, that Florida didn't require masking, that Governor DeSantis was somehow never in favor of the vaccines, when all of that is just not true. No, there are people that say that Governor
not that
DeSantis
I know. He was in favor of that stuff for about a month.
And so you had mentioned briefly, and I had wanted to, touch on this before he interrupted when you were talking about the grand jury. Mm-hmm. And that's something you don't hear about anymore. Ron DeSantis said that he was going to have this grand jury to hold the vaccine manufacturers accountable and to crack down on what he called vaccine misinformation that resulted in people getting injured. But then when people started doing more research and more opposition research came out that showed that actually Ron DeSantis had these executive orders. He's on video signing for the vaccine, pushing out his own misinformation, saying that they're 99% effective and that you cannot get COVID if you're vaccinated. He all of a sudden just doesn't want to. He would be convicted under his own grand jury. And so now you don't hear about this anymore. And I was just wondering, I sent you a video that I had posted on my Twitter, and I was wondering if we could play that, because I really want people watching to see this, because I'm tired of the lies about President Trump and the vaccine. Okay, he never mandated it. He never forced it on anybody. I'm not vaccinated. I refuse to take it. But I think that it's really disingenuous for people to say, well, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump over the vaccine. I'm going to vote for Ron DeSantis when Ron DeSantis pushed it just as much as anyone else. So if we could please play this video.
Yeah, let's play it.
On DeSantis, he wants a grand jury to investigate COVID-19's vaccines to determine if any lies or propaganda was pushed during the immunization campaigns. State your name for the court.
I am Ron DeSantis.
Ron DeSantis, the big question is does the vaccine work?
So my view is if you get a vaccine,
They can see it, right?
the vaccines are effective, you're immune.
If you are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, the chance of you getting seriously ill or dying from COVID is effectively zero.
Is the COVID-19 vaccine safe?
The vaccines protect you. Get vaccinated. Vaccine data is fantastic.
It's a single dose. You take it one time, you don't have to worry about it.
Do you support the vaccine?
We're encouraged and we want to make available the vaccine.
We are number one in the country for doses per capita.
I had also the privilege to be able to actually sign for the vaccines from FedEx.
We're not going to stop until every senior that wants a shot gets a shot.
We're going to give them more because we want the shots to go in the arms.
A RICO indictment.
I gotta say something.
Has
I
been
have to say
indicted
something. This argument over Ron DeSantis' position is nothing to do with efficacy or arguments about anything medical. If you have any medical issues, talk to your doctor. This is a political question of people who are critical of Trump over vaccines or Ron DeSantis are critical of vaccines. Again, nothing prescriptive related to medical issues. That's for your doctor. But the political debate over who supported or didn't support, I think, is the question.
Right.
Yeah,
This-
and the
now
media
this is-
doesn't ever want to show that. And so I think it's important because
I have seen that before. I'm completely in agreement that what he said there was wrong. As a matter of fact, when he came out and he said not wrong, but that was the information that he had at the time. He's trying to protect his people. This is what he was told by the Trump team. He's trying to protect his people. You know, leaders have got to make decisions with only about 30% of the information. He was erring on the side of caution, but then as he looked into it, he realized that this was
I will
improper,
make the
and he
argument
backed away from
that
it.
in the context of being a governor with the highest elderly population in
had
the
to do
United
it.
States, that I think he was justified in pushing
Right.
the vaccine for that population in particular. The statistics came out where the elderly, the at-risk,
Right.
people who are obese could benefit and reduce their chances of serious illness or death from the vaccines. The issue was the mandates, which he was one of the first governors to, later, much later, after Trump had already left office, to say that there would not, to successfully get through that there would be no COVID
my
vaccines.
point is simply just showing that he was pro-vaccine because I've seen people
That's
like
true.
Christina
And so
Bobbitt-
is Donald
at
Trump.
one point.
And so is
Yes,
Donald
and
Trump to the change his mind.
I'm just saying, I know that Donald Trump has pushed the vaccine, but my point is
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of these DeSantis social media influencers, including Christina Pushaw, whose tweets herself, are archived that show that she was talking about how pro-vaccine DeSantis was. I've now seen her do a 180 and say things that suggest that Ron DeSantis was never pushing the vaccine. Yeah. And a lot of people tend to believe this because you have Fox News, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, pushing this lie, but then nobody wants to talk about the fact that Rupert Murdoch had a private meeting with Ron DeSantis at his ranch in California where he told him, let me just say this really quick, where he told him that, don't worry, all of my media empire, my entire empire, Fox News, he owns the New York Post, Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, and HarperCollins Publishing, which, by the way, you want to talk about this debate coming up. Okay, Rupert Murdoch gave Ron DeSantis a $2 million, well, it's rumored to be more than that, but at least that we know of, $2 million book deal with his publishing company, which of course was used as the shadow campaign leading up to the election before he could get the law changed. And so they want to attack Trump and say, oh, come on, Trump, you need to debate Ron DeSantis. You're a coward, right? Like never back down. They took my video footage, which they didn't have permission to do from my meeting with President Trump this last weekend. And they used it to create an attack ad against President Trump. And they're mocking him, saying that he should debate. Why should Donald Trump show up to a debate hosted by Fox News, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, when Rupert Murdoch
I'm so happy he's not showing up at this debate.
gave Ron DeSantis a $2 million book deal months ago, invited him to his ranch in California and said, don't worry, we're behind you 100%. And then Discovery text messages from the Dominion Fox News lawsuit shows that Rupert Murdoch instructed all of Fox News to make Donald Trump a non-person. That's what you call a conflict of interest. And so a lot of people don't know this, and I'm tired of seeing them attack Donald Trump as a coward. Donald Trump is not a coward. He could destroy anybody on that stage, but they're not being honest about the financial and the personal conflict of interest that is presented by Fox News hosting this debate.
Let's talk about the debate, though.
Let me say one more thing about the vaccine. The problem, this demonstrates exactly why Donald Trump should not be president. Donald Trump becomes so ego involved with his decisions that he can't pivot away when he realizes that there's new information that says this was incorrect. Governor DeSantis led with boldness on the vaccine to try to protect his elderly population because that's the information that he had at the time. But then in a short amount of time, he realized that new data came in. He's like, wait a minute, this is wrong. And the reason why Governor DeSantis is even in the conversation now was because he had the most open state and the most free state in America. Now, President Trump, they say that President Trump was just listening to the experts. No, many experts were coming to President Trump and they said, listen, during the middle of a pandemic, you do not want to introduce a vaccine. Why is that? Because you will create variants. People don't realize that the COVID virus, the COVID epidemic, went up like this. Bell curve was actually dying out when the vaccine came out, and then researched why. Because
I don't
we had
see
variants.
any connection there. Pfizer actually dragged their feet to make sure that he didn't get credit before the election. Before they released the vaccine, and
but you can see
the important thing to say here, because I really looked at this and I changed my mind. I did deep research on this, and I actually changed my mind because my view of it was that DeSantis was out in front. He was out there leading things from the very beginning. But actually, if you go back to April, they started the lockdowns. And April 1st, and then April 30th, he said, we're going to start easing the lockdowns. And it wasn't until September that they said, effectively, your business is open. We're not going to stop you. So there were no lockdowns.
Except there were lockdowns.
So the point is
in Miami, but that was in
Miami. In Palm Beach County, too. I had the executive order.
Very different policy toolbox than Trump. And people sort of forget how much the media attacked Trump for not being more aggressive and taking control of the country, and they can accuse him of being like a fascist or a dictator. If anything, he was way too hands off and letting Fauci.
We got 2 minutes.
Adding to what Kyle said too, a lot of people tend to forget this. Donald Trump didn't control the COVID task force response at the White House. That was Mike Pence, who's running for president now. So if you're unhappy with the way that the COVID response was when President Trump was in the White House, go blame Mike Pence, because Mike Pence was in control.
We have 2 minutes, Trump, but I want to talk about the debate.
Okay, but it would have been difficult to get rid of Fauci anyway.
The big thing coming up is whether or not Trump will debate. It's seeming like he won't.
He already confirmed last night on Truth Social he's not doing it.
He's not going to do it.
Awesome for us.
Why is that awesome?
Because Trump is giving DeSantis the center podium. Also, everybody's going to be attacking DeSantis. That means what? Ding, ding, ding. DeSantis gets more time to talk. DeSantis does very well when he's under assault because he's very smart. And as Megyn Kelly says, this guy is 10 deep on the issues. He understands the issues deep, deep, deep. And all these people coming after him, this is going to be a great debate for DeSantis. DeSantis is going to win Iowa. He needs to win Iowa. And why Iowa matters this time is because it will take off the whole idea that Trump is unbeatable, and all those 30-point leads and stuff were obviously fake. That's why it matters this time.
Let's do. I guess because we're about to wrap.
I gave my explanation, okay, as to why Donald Trump shouldn't attend this debate. If you were selected for jury duty, okay, and you ended up, one of the questions was like, do you have any conflicts, right? Or say one of the jurors was married or related to the judge, you wouldn't be able to serve on that jury. So why should Donald Trump show up to a debate hosted by Fox News when the owner and the CEO of Fox News in legal proceedings relating to the 2020 election, okay, their lawsuit that cost them nearly $800 million that they had to send Dominion, said, let's make Trump a non-person. That's Fox News. They're going to make Donald Trump a non-person during this debate. And he already said that Fox News is 100% behind DeSantis. So that's a conflict of interest. Maybe if there was another moderator from another media entity that didn't have financial ties in the millions of dollars for Ron DeSantis, which Rupert Murdoch has done through his publishing company, HarperCollins, as I've reported on extensively, then we could have a conversation about this. But these people are acting in bad faith by saying that, oh, Donald Trump's a coward. He's not a coward. And Ron DeSantis is is not a good debater. Look, Charlie Crist, okay, his policies are left-leaning, but he absolutely destroyed Ron DeSantis during the gubernatorial debate by asking him, are you going to commit to serving all 4 years? And DeSantis, he's on the spectrum, as I said. Politico's reported about how he's, likely autistic. He tensed up. He has all these weird tics, and he's not going to do well on a debate stage.
I think DeSantis is a good debater on contrary, but because I think he appeals to people who are not in the Trump camp. I think they want to see somebody who's statesmanlike, who is very quick on it, nimble on his feet in terms of policy and defending policies, getting into things. He's more reassuring for voters who are not likely to be responsive to Trump's activation, sort of media theatrics. So I think this is what really turns the Trump supporters off of DeSantis. It's just that he has a different target demo than Trump supporters. So I don't necessarily agree with some of this where he tries to copy Trump, and I don't see any of that. But I think that this is good for him, essentially, that he gets to go after Ramaswamy, who's like his biggest threat. So I think that the memo that we saw, I think is generally right, but we're going to have to keep an eye on whether he actually defends Trump or not against Christie. I'm a little bit skeptical.
Well, now we know that it's disingenuous.
A little skeptical. We'll see.
We now know that it's fake. We now know from the memo that it's not real, genuine.
We'll have to see his actions,
a defense of President Trump. It's pretend so that you can.
But that's what his consultants said.
So we're gonna start to wind it down, I suppose, and give you guys. I'll give each of you a chance to say one more thing and maybe shout something out, like if you want to shout.
We're having so much fun, though.
I know. That's what I said. I was like, I like this. We're gonna get to noon.
I want to go for another 2 hours.
It's great. But so, final thoughts, and then shout out your social.
Final thoughts. I think that not showing up for the debate makes Trump look weak and afraid. Okay, and I think to the average voter who's not that engaged in this, watching this the first time, they're going to be like, "Where's Trump? This is a problem for him." I think DeSantis is going to shine. As far as, and something we didn't talk about this whole time, which is unfortunate, is I don't believe that Donald Trump can win the general election. I think a vote for Trump in the primary is a vote for Joe Biden in the general election, because Trump cannot win. Especially if he's convicted on one of these 85 million different counts. He's not going to win the general election. So that is half of my entire situation is we're looking at an impossible candidate that cannot win. And that's why I oppose him. And that's why I'm in favor of Governor DeSantis, because I think Governor DeSantis can win and will win this election. And he's going to win the primary too. He's going to take Iowa, then he's going to take New Hampshire, then he's going to take South Carolina. Trust my words. South Carolina will be Trump's firewall. If DeSantis can break through there, all the other candidates will be off the map. This is a whole different game. And this is why Iowa matters this time more than other times, because it will break that veil of invincibility that these pollsters have created with these fake polls for Trump. We will all of a sudden know that those 30-point leads in the polls were absolutely fake. Well, if DeSantis loses Iowa, I agree. DeSantis is in trouble. He needs to win Iowa. That's why he's all in on Iowa. I will agree with that. He needs to win Iowa.
Right on. Do you want to shout out your social media, Twitter?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm Mitchell VII at Twitter. And I appreciate you coming by. My website is yourvoicenews.com. And I put out daily podcasts, and we usually do 70 to 400. We just did a 425,000 views one the other day. So those get good viewership, and we appreciate you on that. I'm 100% DeSantis. Was a Trump guy. Know where they're coming from. Now I'm 100% DeSantis.
Right on.
Yeah, so I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to make the case for President Trump. And look, I think that's what we need to understand is that we are right now in an unprecedented time in our nation's history. Okay, law and order is under attack, and our freedoms and our liberties are under attack, not just by the Democrats and a weaponized DOJ, but also by the Republican Party that is just as guilty by standing by and being silent because they're complicit. Okay, this is a uniparty. And as we have seen by Donald Trump's first term in office, okay, he is the voice for the forgotten man, okay, the forgotten American that has been screwed over by both political parties. And I think that at the end of the day, when you talk to most people, we actually have more in common than we think and that we know, because this two-party system that they have brainwashed everybody into thinking exists is used to divide us, when in reality, it is just a uniparty that wants to have selections as opposed to elections. And it wasn't until Donald Trump that the American people and the forgotten man actually had a voice. And people can try to discredit and erase President Trump's legacy. That was the whole purpose of deplatforming after January 6th. But I brought a copy of 1,000 of President Trump's accomplishments, okay? You can easily find President Trump's accomplishments, and you need to read through this because he's tried and true. Running a state is not the same as running a country. We know that President Trump had success. Okay, you admitted it yourself when you had your show. You called him many times the greatest president this country's ever had, and your show every single night.
I have never in my life said that Trump is the greatest president this country has ever had.
I have it on my phone. You saying that he was sent by God to save this country. Okay,
that's not the same as saying that. You're saying he's better than Abraham Lincoln, better than George Washington. Are you kidding me?
The fact of the matter is,
let's clear the record. I never said that.
Final thoughts.
He has a proven record. Okay, and as President Trump often says, okay, the only thing standing in between you and them, and you as in the American people, and them being the weaponized government, is me, President Donald Trump. And so if they take him, then they're coming for us next. And everybody needs to put their personal feelings about personality aside and say, do you really want to live in a country where they could potentially send a president to jail for 700 years, let him die in prison, okay, over his contesting of an election? Don't you want to be able to express your opinion on issues like election integrity and big tech social media censorship without having a fear that you're going to be locked away as a political prisoner of an illegitimate communist regime for the rest of your life? And I'm asking people, you don't have to be friends with Donald Trump. We're not asking you to go have a beer with this guy. Not that he would, because he's sober, but we're not asking you guys to go have dinner with the guy or go watch a game of golf with him. Although I had a lot of fun doing that. Okay. We're asking you to elect the most competent and qualified person who can get our country out of this mess, because we are losing our country and we will fall to communism. We will fall to stolen elections if we don't get President Trump back in the White House. And so I am honored to support President Trump. I'm a Trump loyalist. I've always been a Trump loyalist. Nothing is ever going to stop that or change that. Okay, I don't care what people say. There's nothing that would stop me from voting for President Trump, even if he was in a jail cell. And I invite all people watching to join me in fighting for President Donald Trump just as hard as he fought for all of us over these last 7 years when he didn't need to do this. He gave up a life of luxury so that he could give us a voice, and we need to fight for President Trump like he fought for all of us. So, like I said, Donald Trump did nothing wrong. I wear this shirt everywhere I go. And
obstruction of justice is nothing wrong.
Oh, and final thoughts, because Lauren needs to shout out her.
Okay. My final thoughts is
just shout out your.
Please follow me. Yeah. Okay, I'm banned on most social media sites, so you're not going to find me on Facebook or Instagram or any of that stuff. But I am back on Twitter now at Laura Loomer. Please follow me. And we didn't get to talk about everything today, so please follow me and subscribe to my Substack. It's lauraloomer.substack.com. And that's where you can read all of my in-depth investigative reports on this issue and see all the receipts and evidence for yourself. I'm also on Gab, Truth Social, and Getter at Laura Loomer, and then on Telegram at Loomered Official.
Right on.
So that's where people can follow
Kyle,
me.
final thoughts and shout out.
All right. So in normal times, I would support Ron DeSantis for president, but these are not normal times as I've laid out. I think that Ron DeSantis and Trump are very much on the same page in terms of their policies, but I would give DeSantis the edge in terms of bureaucratic management and being able to fight the culture war. I think there's a lot of things he's been out in front fighting ESG, fighting central bank digital currencies, the parents' rights bill. I think supporting girls' sports. I think that he's really attuned at that, but he can do it in a way where he's like a nuclear submarine. He could run silent, he could run deep, and he can attack the enemy before they even know it. Trump is like a battleship. He goes in, he's loud, guns blazing, but the enemy can see him from 1,000 miles away. So I think that, in terms of the art of war that Donald Trump likes so much, DeSantis is much more astute at being able to remain formless and be able to take his enemy by surprise. But again, this is war that we're in. This is a culture war, and it's bigger than that now. Circumstances have changed. The political prosecutions, they are launched when Donald Trump decided to run for re-election in 2024. So they are rigging the election now, just like they rigged it in 2020, and they tried to rig the election in 2016. And I'm using that term in terms of just unfairly abusing the system in order to get a political outcome. So it should be very clear what I'm meaning by that. So I think that he's exposing both the GOP establishment as being feckless, as not really taking action to fight the Democrats. So they're acting too much like controlled opposition. And if they change their behavior, I would be happy to see that, because Kevin McCarthy, we're tired of the statements. We're tired of you foot dragging. So they're very passive, but blustery approach to protesting the deep state doesn't really matter to me. I care about policies and outcomes, and I think that right now they're hanging Donald Trump out to dry. And it may be right what you say, Bill, in terms of him, inviting conflict. But I think he's exposing the people who are conflicting against him and for being just malicious actors, deeply corrupt. And, I think when we get down to the race where it's Biden versus Trump, they have very similar polling numbers. Let's hope that Donald Trump can pivot and become the statesman that independent people like. But like I said, I don't think DeSantis has as much an advantage in swing states now to the electoral map issue that we're talking about as before. So let me just get to where you can find me. I'm at Kyle N.A. Becker on Twitter. Please check out my Relentless podcast that's coming up at the end of this month. I'm putting a lot of work into preparing that to do a really great show, make it very professionally produced. I used to work at Fox News and I was an associate producer and writer there. So, I have some experience and, I hope to bring a rational voice and an independent voice into the media. And I appreciate Tim having me here to discuss with these very passionate and informed advocates for their sides.
I appreciate that as well.
Thank you all for coming. This was very, very fun and entertaining. We'll see how things play out.
I was hoping it'd be more dynamic. It was a little too chill for my taste. But.
Yeah, it is what it is. But we got a lot of stuff coming up in the news. We'll see how it goes. And
I
thank
forgot
you for
to
coming.
say too that I know a lot of people are talking about my shirt I saw online right now, asking where they can get it. You can get it on my website, Loomered, Loomered, right? Loomered, like getting loomered.com. And that's also the name of my book. I forgot to plug my book, Loomered, How I Became the Most Banned Woman in the World. I want to thank Tim because I didn't get to say this earlier. A lot of people have demonized me and lied about me and denied me a platform over the last few years, but you're one of the only people that actually stood up for free speech. And I recognize that even though this is my first time on your show, I really want to thank you for defending me and calling out the election interference of my campaigns, because you have a lot of integrity. And even if you don't agree with somebody on everything, you still fight for free speech. And not many people are willing to actually allow such, polarizing figures online who are at each other's throats to have a platform. And in an age of cancellation and censorship, I want to thank you so much for always fighting for free speech. And it means a lot to me as somebody who, has been silenced.
Right on. Well, thanks.
One last thing. People need to be clear. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that being a presidential candidate provides you immunity from prosecution. And this whole idea that, if you're prosecuting Trump, it must be election interference. There is nothing in the Constitution that says you cannot indict a presidential candidate. So let's get it.
But lest we go all the way back into it, we'll wrap it up there. But thank you for coming. Thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you all for watching. This has been a blast. We're going to do a lot more of these, and we'll see you all next time.